I'm going to call the Willits City Council meeting to order on this October 23rd at 6:30 p.m. We will begin with the pledge to the flag, and I will have council member Strong lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call.
Councilmember Connie? Here. Strong? Here. Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor?
Present. All right, everyone is here this evening. We have a few changes to the agenda. Under public matters, which is item 3, we're going to swap items A and C. So item C will go first, then B, then A. Just to make you aware of that. And then one other item which we'll need a motion to approve is to add an agenda item as item 9C. And the item is for the resurfacing of the Madrone Street from Magnolia Street to Poplar Avenue.
I would like to so move.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Anybody from the public? All right. If there's no further objections, I'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Strong? Yes. Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor?
Yes.
To clarify, this is just to put it on the...
Yes.
Yes, the motion carries that the item will be added to the agenda, item number 9C, as indicated, the Madrone Street resurfacing. All right, moving on. Our next order of business is public communication. The City Council welcomes input from the audience. If there is a matter of business on the agenda that you're interested in, you may address the council when this matter is considered. If you wish to speak on a matter that is not on the agenda, you may do so at this time. In order for everyone to be heard, please limit your comments to 3 minutes per person. The Brown Act regulations do not allow action to be taken on audience comments in which the subject matter is not listed on the agenda. Members of the public are asked to observe the rules of decorum. While the City Council welcomes public criticism of our policies, procedures, programs, or services of the agency, behavior that disrupts, disturbs, impedes, or renders infeasible the orderly conduct of the meeting, and that includes, but is not limited to, the use of profanity, slurs, yelling from the audience, threatening remarks, physically threatening conduct, or physical or verbal displays of disrespect, will not be tolerated, and the individual will have to be removed immediately. With that being said, we're glad you're here this evening. If you would like to speak to us on an item that is not on the agenda, I see we have a hand, and I'll let Robin Leeler go first. You'll step up to the mic there and state your name for the record, if you wouldn't mind.
I know, I keep forgetting that. I'm Robin Leeler. Thank you. I left the meeting 2 weeks ago feeling pretty dismayed when Larry Stransky and Sabrina Rodriguez had to leave the room for a major discussion. And I'm still struggling with it, that I didn't think that had to be. And then when I read the packet, the brick of a packet that came this week, I saw something else about, and it was in the summary of the, can't remember what it was in the summary of the agenda. And it said, identified City Council conflict of interest. The City Attorney and City Manager have identified 2 potential disqualifying conflicts of interest items regarding the adoption of the land use designation within the land use element. This time they're saying that because of the mixed use designation, that Larry Stransky and Greta Connie may have a conflict going. And it is therefore recommended that the council members Stransky and Connie be recused from this limited discussion and action. Next, because of the cleanup action, Mayor Rodriguez, it's recommended that she be recused from this limited discussion. I don't feel this is right. Recused is when a judge recuses themselves because they feel there's a bias, or they know people, or they have prior knowledge of something. And the wording of "they be recused" is really not proper. You can recuse yourself, but can't be recused by somebody else. I brought this up with my best friend last night, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to write a poem about that." And I'd like to share the poem. It says, "Recuse me. Drink water, no voting on water. Same goes for owning a house or business with water service. Pay taxes, no voting on taxation or spending. Got trees? No tree ordinance for you. Live within 500 feet of a sidewalk or on a street without a sidewalk? Recuse yourself." This can be sung to the staple singers, "Respect yourself." Live on a street without a sidewalk? Same deal. Own a business? No Chamber of Commerce voting for you. Have any disabled or not disabled children in your family? Playground equipment vote? I don't think so. Have a street in front of your house? Guess what? Ever been stopped by the cops? Conflict of interest when dealing with police issues. Franchises or rights of way for utilities? I hope you're not enjoying cable, gas, electricity, or landline phones. And I think it would be impolite or perhaps impolitic to comment on sewer service recusals. I think almost all of us geezers should be able to vote on the skate park, however. Thank you. I have extra copies if anyone would like the poem.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public? Go ahead, sir. And then we'll come over here.
I'm Skip Lucier with the Willits Lions Club, and I'm the charter organization representative for Troop 42. I'm here to say thank you to the council for your charitable contribution. It's well needed, and we really appreciate it. That's really all I got to say, but thank you.
Thank you, Skip. All right, ma'am, you're next.
Hi, my name is Deirdre Santinello. I'm not a City of Willits resident. I live in Brook Trails, but I come down Sherwood Road every day. And I realized that the part that's, when you first come up Sherwood, it's fine and nice and smooth. And when you get to the top of the hill, it's also nice and smooth. But that section in between, which as far as I know, is the jurisdiction of the City of Willits. It's getting worse and worse, and the rain is coming, and I'd like to know if there's any plan, maybe I haven't heard of it, but to resurface this part of Sherwood Road.
We can't have a full discussion on it, but I think that it would be fair to just give a clarification that the City of Willits' boundaries do not extend up to the top of Sherwood Road. How far are we up? The city limits?
It's about halfway. The comments were correct. The worst part would be within the city jurisdiction. The surface of the...
How far up Sherwood Road?
Bruce Burton's house.
Yeah.
That's not very far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not that far, but
That's not that far.
it's getting worse.
Is that the section you're referring to?
Yep.
Okay. We have a transportation meeting tomorrow morning. I
Okay.
think that's why Greta was going to raise her hand too. We have a transportation meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock where we talk about transportation issues, and I would invite you to come, and we can have a discussion about it as well at that meeting if you like, if you're available.
Okay, and by the way, I don't know if you're aware, but there used to be a sign at that section saying where this property of Willits starts, and that's been down for several weeks. I don't know if it was taken down deliberately or somebody vandalized it, but there's not a sign there anymore.
We can discuss that tomorrow. Go ahead.
Okay.
I was just going to ask, is it possible for the city manager to reach out to this resident with an answer to her question
Yes.
outside of the meeting? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We are looking at funding opportunities to stabilize that road. Unfortunately, resurfacing is not the perfect answer. It's going to be a much more significant project.
You know what happens when,
But we'll talk, I think it would be appropriate tomorrow. If you can come, and if you can't, then we can follow up with you too, okay? Just because it's not on the agenda. Thank you for your comment. Is there anyone else that would like to address us on an item?
Mark Walker. Daily I take my grandson over here to the park, let him play in the mornings and sometime for the afternoon. And I was wondering, why don't you guys have a catcher bag on your Kubota grass cutter? Because I noticed that the man trimming the grasses and come back with a weed blower blowing it all. It's like still in time. Because if you had the bags, because we got enough lawns to mow, just mow all day till you fill them up, then dump them. And then at the same time that day, I was talking to a gentleman that was working on the bathrooms, putting in the maglocks or whatever they got. And he explained to me that that was a situation where the individual was either annoyed or harassed by the city about being there swinging too much. And that's why the cost of doing all this occurred, because he was agitated, or whoever this person is. So I was just wondering if we're addressing any of these kind of concerns as far as, you know, it's an employee kind of thing, time management skills.
Walter Collin is our Services and Facilities Director, and maybe you could connect with him.
Right, well, yeah,
Yeah.
the city can handle it. I'm sure I got confidence in you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Anyone else on an item that's not on the agenda? Okay. Well, thank you for your comments this evening, and I'm going to move on to the next item if there's nothing further. Next would be public matters, and the first item is going to be a public hearing, so I'm opening the hearing. It'll be discussion and possible action approving a resolution to certify the final environmental impact report and adopt the mitigation and monitoring and report program for the City of Willits General Plan Land Use Element Update and approve said project. And
yeah, what you said.
yeah, I'm gonna pull up the item real quick.
She told me I can figure out how to get this PowerPoint up by myself. Sometimes it's the easy things, everybody. All right. Good evening, Council. Dusty Duley, I'm your Community Development Director. And what we have before you is prospective adoption of the General Plan Land Use Element, including making application of a sphere of influence application to LAFCO, as well as certification of the EIR supporting the land use element pursuant to CEQA. So this is very much the policy document, or
Gentlemen, we're having a difficult time hearing. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the policy document, or often called the blueprint for how the community is going to develop and accommodate growth over the next 20 years, or even possibly longer, since the last time the city took on this important exercise was in 1992. So we're in front of the council on August 28th with a focus on the policy language in the land use element, followed by a focus on September 11th on the EIR and the land use diagram. So the focus for this meeting is really not to give a full recap like we did those previous two meetings, but rather focus on some changes to both the policies as well as the land use diagram based on the community feedback we received at those meetings, council direction, as well as some changes that were initiated by some of the comments that came from agencies as well as the public commenting on the EIR itself. So again, I'm going to focus on the changes to the policies, changes to the land use diagram, and then we have our esteemed consultants with Plan West with us again, John and Colette are here. John's going to take over the presentation to talk more about the EIR itself and go over some of the comments that we received, as well as just an overview of that process. So just very quickly, this has been 2 years in the making and just coming to this moment, and we've had a lot of good discussions with the community, with other agencies, with the council, and so there's been a lot of work, a lot of discussions that have brought us to this moment tonight. So I do want to thank the community, the 300 or so people that completed the survey. We had open houses where we had 70 or 80 people. We had other meetings maybe with not 80 people, but altogether many community members that participated in this process, and absolutely they formed many of the policies and work that you see here tonight. We also early on in the process created an advisory committee made up of diverse groups of community members. So the Willits Chamber of Commerce, the Sherwood Valley Band of Pomo Indians, some of our business leaders, some of our largest employers. Appreciate Henry Moss with Metal Effects, Emily Heitman with Leaf Organics, our own Jay Frazier representing the local builders with Frazier Construction, Lyndon Givens with the hospital, Alan Filari, our former community development director, some folks from the fire department. So just want to appreciate all the folks that have given up their time and energy towards this important document. This slide we've had before, but just again, just wanting to emphasize the community outreach and effort that the community put forward in getting their voice heard in this process. So I mentioned the multiple advisory committee meetings, the open house, and then this is actually the 6th public hearing that we've had on this matter with the City Council. Just some timeline of some of the more recent major events that have led to this. Again, this project is grant funded. The council authorized us to make that a priority. It took a good year just to secure 3 different grants to support this process. And then, after that, we really get to going. We were able to secure the assistance of Plan West and get moving on this project. So just want to go over some changes to the policies since the public draft was released. Now we're reviewing the final draft of the land use element. So we understood when the bypass went in, council community members were concerned about potential development around the interchanges, both the north and south interchanges. We worked with LAFCO to identify those as areas of interest, to provide emphasis on the fact that these were certainly areas of concern for the city. Not that the county or Caltrans wouldn't notify us of any potential developments around our area. They do that, but this just sort of puts that extra emphasis on that. What we've done here with this new policy is actually provide that as an actual policy, and you can read it here, but essentially what we're stating is that we're not supporting development around the commercial development around the highway, given its prospective impact on our existing business community. And so what this does, I would say, is if there isn't any whispers of this at all that I'm aware of, and the zoning doesn't really, and ownership doesn't really lend itself to that, but understandably we still probably have some community members, especially business leaders, that are concerned about that. What this does is it sets policy where if somebody went into the county or was talking to Caltrans, they would now understand that there is this strong policy that's very clear that you're not going to have the support from Willits when this happens. So we wanted to bring forward this policy for council consideration tonight. You may also recall at the previous meeting, Tom Mann was the community member that brought up the concern of seeing franchise formula-based businesses within the downtown area. staff got direction from council to develop a policy that would lead us towards creating some zoning regulations that would restrict the location of large franchise or formula-based businesses within our downtown area. And within the land use map, there's figure 3.2, and it defines that downtown area as Highway 20 to the north end of town, and then down a certain distance along Commercial Street. So this was the policy that we came up based on that direction. As we were, when we released the EIR, we received comments back from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. Understandably, as they were looking at some of the land use changes that we're proposing, they understand that we do have some properties that have some soil contaminations within the city, and they were concerned about specifically residential or other uses being allowed to go in on those handful of properties. There's already an existing process that we go through to screen those properties, understand if there's any land use restrictions, covenants that may restrict that use, or if there's any sort of red flags that have come from water quality or Department of Toxic Control. They maintain GeoTracker and the EnviroStar databases. We, like I think all, hopefully, planning departments, we do cross-reference projects with those databases. But what we've done is we've made that abundantly clear through this policy, and Water Quality Board was happy to see this effort. So that's what this policy was added to the land use. Let's see here. Oh, there was a button you gave me, John, to click right back, and I didn't even use it. Oh, sorry. There was the floodway land use map overlay designation. We're looking to delete this. This is somewhat redundant and unnecessary. I think we know where the water in our creeks are. Yeah, okay. Okay. Oh, and then subsequent to our last meeting with council, we had a very productive meeting. John and I attended a meeting with many of the staff of the Sherwood Valley Band of Homo Indians. Their comments were quite helpful, both for the narrative of the EIR as well as rewording and modifying some of the policies that we had here. So we made some minor modifications to the environmental justice policy. We came to understand that when we talk about cultural resources, it's not just those things that are under the ground. It's also some of the plants that they use just to support their culture. And so those are living above ground resources. So we understood that, obviously, and added that language, including living cultural resources, to the policy language. And okay. Okay. So then we added some additional policies to further support CEQA mitigation related to tribal consultation. We clarified that with climate change, the goal would be to consistent with state targets. We got some language that's supported by the tribe is related to avoiding impacts to tribal cultural resources. And then also this was appreciated as well. So you have like the standard discovery clause if you come across cultural resources when you're doing a construction project. You stop work and you contact the city, we get a hold of the tribe, and then we make an analysis of that before we allow further construction to happen. And of course, I don't think we have anyone on our staff that would be so naive, but you know, as you find stuff, yeah, you're not supposed to take pictures of it, you're not supposed to post it on social media. there's actually people that look to go and steal these types of things. And so obviously those kinds of ridiculous types of behaviors can provide awareness of where those resources may be located. So this was much appreciated language to add to our policy, and this was with the help of the tribe. And sort of the same situation going on here with the inadvertent encounter with archaeological or cultural resources or paleontology. So this was a mitigation measure that was identified by a community member and was further enhanced by the biologist that worked on the EIR. And I'm just going to kind of scroll through these. These are in the staff report, maybe a little bit easier to write, but again, measures to ensure that future development doesn't impact our creek riparian area or biological resources. And you talk about different opportunities for low impact development, landscaping, vegetation, down to the danger of stray cats and the impact that outdoor lighting can have on streams. So that is a quick overview of the changes to the policy language. There were also a few updates to the land use diagram itself, as well as the proposed sphere of influence. So this slide is showing the properties. Let's see here. This is on the north end of town. This is Sanhedrin High School. These are some residential homes just off of Main Street. That's to your right. North, of course, is up. This was a request by the property owner to go to mixed use. These three properties are owned by the same owner. This is formerly Rich Padula's old office, just to, again, make sure we're oriented on what we're talking about in the city. And the request was to go to mixed use. We had previously identified this as downtown mixed use, but because these properties don't have commercial storefronts fronting Main Street, the recommendation is to change them from downtown mixed use to general mixed use. And we talked about the differences at the last meeting there. Currently, these properties are zoned commercial general. This property was then going to become an island of commercial, or possibly go to residential. And talking to that property owner, they said, if the neighbors are going to go general mixed use, why don't you just throw me in there too? So that made sense to us. So we're looking to make that change to the land use diagram. Let's see, as council recalls, we had a good, healthy discussion about including the Exley Lane area in our sphere of influence. Ultimately, we chose to remove it, so this is showing that change to our sphere of influence. Also on the east side of the city, this is the access road to the back of the rodeo grounds. The rodeo grounds and Rec Grove Park are shown in the blue here. This is your city limits is here. These are the county offices. This area still to be included in the sphere of influence. This is some residential property. The county has zoned for R3 multifamily. We're carrying that forward with the pre-zoning. Previously, we had this area that's hatched out in red included in the sphere of influence. These two properties actually have the ag zoning. It's not clear if LAFCO would support it if we move forward, but we did have a property owner let us know that they were not interested in being in the sphere of influence, and so we're looking to accommodate that request. But by removing these two pieces, it also canceled out the other adjacent ones here too. That's that change.
What is the current use of that?
Sorry, I can get back there. I realize it's going to end there. Then this was the other change here, but I'll get back to that. Help me out, John. What did I get?
Aren't they ranchettes or something like that? something.
Yeah, if you click the bottom.
Okay. Can you ask the question again?
What is the current use of that area that's being taken out of the?
Yeah, so this property, they're being used for residential purposes and maybe some small scale animal raising. I don't know if there's personal or some limited commercial use to it. This is the Schuster property underneath the bypass for his trucking business. This property again, single family home, I believe, with maybe some minor animals on it. Again, they're zoned Ag 40. They're much smaller than 40 acres. They're sort of quasi being used for that purpose. We were going to pre-zone them and put our, ag on there should those owners ever want to request to be annexed into the city for the benefit of maybe extending sewer services out or something like that. But again, I mean, if those owners do want to be annexed into the future, they'll just need to apply to be included in the sphere of influence as well. Again, there's water services that go out that way, and that was essentially the logic of including them. But we are going to retain these residential properties. They do, based on their current zoning and size, there is some housing development potential there. And those very well, at the request of the owners, could be brought into the city services and extended, and we can see some decent residential development on those parcels. And then there was just one last property to focus in on, if I can get to it. Yeah, okay. So this was a property of discussion back at the August 28th meeting, and it's actually this large, I think 50-something acre property. Here it is in an aerial view. And sort of after having a discussion with the XE Lane and the concern about development impact on the woodlands, then this property obviously came into question, even though it wasn't part of that XE block. Staff agreed that we would follow up with the property owner, try to understand what their ideas were for developing the property. I also sort of understood from my tenure at the county that there was a PD combining district as part of a rezone that happened. I thought it might be about clustering development near the highway to avoid development and impact to the woodlands. I was able to speak with one of the county planners, and that's not what it is. It's a little bit convoluted. I didn't get a chance to look at the file, but it's not going to be as simple as sort of just carrying over the same restrictions that the county has placed on the property. So there's, I'd say the owner still is interested in being in the sphere of influence, but it may not serve the city at this point to include that property in the sphere. So it may be at council's directions that we could pull that one out. It does maybe make sense, this lower property, to maintain that within the sphere of influence. The topography is not quite as steep. It has, it borders Highway 20. You don't have the significant amount of woodlands there that we would need to potentially be concerned about. But again, the council has the opportunity to request us to remove that property. Currently, it is in our sphere of influence. And just to make that point again, for maybe the council's aware, but others, tonight what you have before you is the opportunity to first certify the environmental impact report, and then second to adopt the land use element. And I think the city attorney has advised you that we've separated that into 3 resolutions there. And so when we get to that point, we can provide further clarification if needed. But regarding the sphere of influence, that's not, what you're really doing is approving us as staff making an application to LAFCO. And LAFCO is the agency, their commission's the one that approves that. So just to make that clear. And then Mayor, with that concluded my portion of the presentation on the policies and the prospective changes to the land use. diagram, and John was going to come up and provide an overview of some of the comments on the EIR and give an overview of that.
Why don't you ever use the names of the streets on these maps? I mean, it makes it really hard for anybody, you know, that is, I mean, how many of these people out in the audience knows where these things are?
Right.
I mean, that's just a suggestion.
Yeah, and Councilmember Stransky, I think you've provided that advice to staff before. So apologies that we didn't get that on some of the slides. We did at least get it on the land use diagram itself, and we called out some of the key streets and then identified some of the school properties like the high school and Blosser and stuff to help orient the viewer. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh, and then good point, John. So just real quick, one of the other things that you see in the final land use element that wasn't in the draft land use element is the implementation measure program there. And so that's just giving, again, most of the details is in the policy itself or some in the implementation measure, but we do have that monitoring program as a tool, you know, to help keep us on track. And it's probably something that we're going to be showing to council in the future, because while we can't do everything at once, we're going to want to start moving forward with some of the implementation measures as soon as possible, and obviously we'll be working with council to set those priorities.
Okay. Are you ready for your presentation?
Mayor, is this a good time to ask questions about the land use element before we get into the EIR?
Well, the way I understood it is that we were going to hear the presentation, and then any individuals on each item would need to recuse themselves during discussion, but is it okay to ask points of clarification?
It is okay, and procedurally, we might as well discuss that for just a second. So the idea or the plan this evening is for Dusty and his consultants to go ahead and give an overview and their presentation and have public discussion and comments. And under the FPPC rules, just so we're all clear on this, if there's a council member who has a disqualifying conflict, you only have to be recused and leave the room when it gets to the point of a discussion on the particular segment that you may have a conflict on. And so the plan is in order, the order presentation rather is first this presentation, and then the taking action on the EIR, and then the next would be taking action on the land use element. And the land use element will be broken into 3 segments. The first segment will address the Main Street mixed use proposal, and council members who own property within Main Street, we're recommending the downtown area be recused. And the next would be the what we call the cleanup section, and that relates to certain residentially non-conforming properties that are owned within the city, and there's going to be a proposal to clean up those designations to designate them as residential, though they are now designated as commercial. And then the final resolution for the land use element would be what is called a final resolution. So the first 2 are carve-outs. Basically, we're carving out from the land use element. First the Main Street and the cleanups, and then it will be followed up with a final that incorporates all of the land use element. So certainly no problem at this point asking for questions for clarification. And we will, though, get into the land use element on 3 segmented decisions.
So the reason I'm asking is because I have some general comments I would like to make about the land use element, as well as some of the specific areas, none of which pertain to the Main Street mixed use area, which is where my conflict of interest lies. I feel like this would be an appropriate time to address them rather than waiting to hear about the, I just blanked on the name, what is the other portion? Environmental impact report, because I feel like when we get that information, our brains will get fuller and more muddied.
Yeah.
So if this is a time that you are okay with, I would like to ask some questions.
I feel that's appropriate,
Yeah,
and I'm
You can
glad.
proceed that way.
Yes, and I'm glad to see that we're changing policy and not making the council member leave during the entire presentation and then later have to watch it on YouTube.
Yeah,
So-
I didn't think that was the intent
Yes,
of the.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay. Okay. So I'm sorry, my glasses have broken. So if I'm doing something wonky, just work with me here. So first off, I wanted to say I really bizarrely enjoyed reading this. It represents a lot of work. You already pointed out 2 years of work and a ton of community input. So thank you for getting us to this point. I feel like this does a very good job of helping lay out the intents and goals of this council as we've expressed in multiple public forums. There are a couple of areas that I earmarked. Most of them you addressed tonight, things that I was really excited about, things that I was happy to see included, that I felt really answered a lot of questions that I heard from community members and questions that council members ourselves have had. So thank you for that. There are a couple of areas where I feel like maybe some of the implementation was a little light. In particular, I was concerned about the South Main Street portion. I'm really glad we included them because I think all of us council members have heard continually from business owners at South Main, when do we get our fix up? When does our portion of Main Street get the treatment that downtown has been getting? And so I'm glad that they're in here, but I do feel like as far as implementable goals and ideas, it's a little light. So what I would hope is that within the next 3 to 6 months, your department would be able to come back to council with some real substance to be able to either add as some kind of an annex to this general plan update, just so that we could have more specifics on how we're actually going to get improvements down at that south end that will help both residents, drivers, pedestrians, and business owners to make that portion of Main Street more user-friendly.
Could I add in an example? Just from discussion that we had before, we had talked about the housing development that's going to go in at the south end of town, and we had talked about how we would incorporate walkability and what kind of businesses we might incorporate in that area to ensure that those people weren't kind of like on an island at the other end of town. That's the kind of substance that I also want to see in that section.
The other thing was in goal LU8, which was all about protecting and sustaining natural resources. We called out oak woodlands a couple of times, oak tree protections. And I just wanted, although I love that because I love oaks, and I know so many community members made comments during public comments, particularly about preserving the oaks at Rec Grove. I feel like the recent debacle of the redwood trees at the Starbucks location shows that there are a lot of people in our community who care about trees in general, not just oaks. So I love that we called out oaks, but I feel like there should be something in here to indicate that we have an interest in planning to preserve heritage trees. We don't want to infringe on property owner rights, but I think that there comes a point when if someone has a giant old tree on their property, it's not just theirs anymore. It belongs to the community. It belongs to all of us. It's a cultural resource that we all take part in, and that's something that we should be looking to protect. And we've talked many times at this council, we've heard from community members over and over again a desire to protect some of those biggest, oldest trees. And so yes, oak tree protections, but I wouldn't mind seeing something in here for heritage tree protections. Trees over a certain age or size. I have just a couple more things, Matt.
I just want to say I agree.
And then the thing that also kind of raised some concerns for me was the cool implementation action plan in the end. I love this part because, as we've said in council many times, our city has been great in the past at making plans, not always as great at implementing them. And I feel like we're really turning a corner here and we're seeing more and more implementation from plans previously adopted as well as plans that have come to us within the last couple of years. I love that. And so this action plan is fantastic because it gives us sort of a roadmap of how we're going to achieve what we're saying we're going to do in this document. However, There are a lot of items on this implementation list that fall to the responsibility of the Community Development Department.
I noticed that.
Some of them within 6 months to a year, some of them within 3 years, many of them within 5 years. I worry about this because I know how impacted your department is. You lost Taylor, you have contract help that won't be there always. And so I really just question, is this realistic? Is this setting a reasonable expectation, not only for you and your staff, but for this council, for future councils, for our community? Will we be able to see these things implemented if they're all falling on your department, which is frankly overworked and often understaffed? So that's a concern in this implementation plan, and I don't know how you'll address that. I talked about this at length with the city manager in our weekly meeting, and one of the things that we talked about is maybe forming an ad hoc committee to sort of have some concerned council members and invite concerned community members to have regular meetings where we're reviewing this document and keeping us all on track and making sure that some of these implementation ideas are actually met. I don't know how the rest of council feels about this, but I thought I would float that maybe we need more oversight to make sure that we're really moving forward on these things instead of saying yes tonight to a plan and then, as we've heard from the community so many times, putting it on a shelf and letting it get dusty. So, not you, Dusty. I mean,
But I say that too. That's one of my lines, yeah.
Okay, so thank you for letting me be long-winded, and that's my comments.
Any other clarifying questions or comments?
I just want to say that thank you very much, Greta. Those are very astute, and I agree with all of your comments. The part that I was a little concerned with in the SOI sphere of influence proposals was that piece that used to be part of the Exley Lane, you know, sort of contiguous with that and the woodlands there. And it sort of bothers me that if it were to be proposed for development with a low intensity or low density residential, it's almost entire it's woodlands, and it would require extending some of the sewer and water service that's available along Highway 20 up into the hills. It seems like a less desirable and more expensive way to provide, you know, future city expansion than most of the other things in the SOI proposals. So I guess I would like to put on our consideration just eliminating that little rectangle that sticks up there, unless there's a future development that shows a way to integrate it, you know, planned unit where some of the density goes closer to the highway. There are ways it could be done, but I would hate to see someone come in and, you know, put roads and sewer lines up there to serve low-density residential into the woodlands. So that's my concern about that.
Okay. Hearing no further comments, I'll go ahead and move on to the presentation. And public, you will have an opportunity to weigh in too.
Just in case. Good evening, council members. My name is John Miller with Plan West Partners, and I'm going to figure out how to get back to.
So it scrolls up and down.
And I just want to state that the microphone doesn't echo into the room. So just, I know some people know, but not everyone does. So if you're a speaker, just speak nice and loud so we can all have the opportunity to hear you.
Okay, so, whoops. Forgive me, I need to get my place back in my documents. Okay, so this slide you've seen a number of times before. Sort of bullets out the CEQA process. The notice of preparation begins the EIR process, and That was published in March of last year. In July of this year, the draft environmental impact report was completed and released, made available to the public both on the city's project webpage and on SequaNet. There was a greater than 45-day comment period that ended on the 13th. In between that time, your council had a meeting where members of the public could give comments on the EIR. We encouraged, essentially requested written comments so we could make sure to respond to the actual comment, not our summary of the comment. A final EIR was prepared that responds to all comments, and law requires that the response to comments, which is usually packaged up as part of the final EIR, be distributed to the public agencies who commented on the EIR at least 10 days prior to this meeting. So on the 10th, the EIR was published on the webpage and sent to all the commenters, and I believe it was sent to everyone who had expressed interest in the project. So it was sent out to the commenters to give them an opportunity to further comment on the subjects that were of concern to them. The final EIR contains a mitigation and monitoring reporting program, which is where an impact is potentially significant and a mitigation is required to reduce the level of significance. The mitigation monitoring and reporting program identifies that mitigation, the responsible party, how it will be implemented, when it will be implemented, and how that gets tracked. Another aspect of the CEQA process of the EIR is the findings of fact and statement of overriding considerations. These aren't part of the EIR, these are the part of the council's action in certifying the EIR, which allows you to approve the project. And so for prior to adopting the land use element, your council needs to certify the EIR, and in doing so, you make a series of findings indicating that you've considered the EIR and that the EIR reflects the independent judgment of the city. And there's also, there's a series of findings relating to each of the impact topics, the evidence contained within it, and there's also a statement of overriding considerations which reflects the impact that is significant and unavoidable, where you're balancing the benefits of the project, the public interest, with this significant environmental impact. So the areas of concern that we went into the process were related to water and wastewater, and to a certain degree traffic congestion, because there's new state laws for CEQA review that relate to vehicle miles traveled and not vehicle congestion. That's the threshold of significance. So these are sort of overall areas of concern. The comment letter, there are 8 comment letters received, and a number of them expressed concern about the water supply and whether or not the city had adequate water supply, how and when the groundwater would be used. There was the Brook Trails Township Community Services District expressed concern about the data used in the wastewater analysis. The conclusion of the analysis indicated that greenhouse gas emissions was a potential impact, and that there isn't sufficient information about the development that may occur, and whether or not the policies contained in the plan would be sufficient to lessen greenhouse gas emissions below the state objectives. And the policies call for climate action planning and climate action plan that contains programs to reduce emissions. And the analysis found that the implementation, which calls back to the policies, but the implementation didn't have the target of being the state's targets. And so the mitigation is to add that to the implementation measure, so modifying the implementation measure that was in the plan, but still found that there's insufficient information, and so the conservative approach is to find that the impacts would be significant and unavoidable, in spite of the mitigation. There were a number of topics that were potentially significant and where mitigations were incorporated, and with CEQA law in a general plan where you are incorporating or you're requiring a mitigation, that mitigation needs to become a part of the plan. So each of these mitigations became plans or policies unless it was a specific discrete step. So in the case of aesthetics, there's a new policy regarding development in hillside areas to encourage clustering and to avoid excavation that would affect views of the hillside from public areas. There was potential impacts relating to agricultural resources, especially within the sphere of influence. And the sphere of influence is going to need to meet the requirements of the Local Agency Formation Commission and their state law. And so the mitigation is to carry out annexation planning as part, to evaluate the agricultural resources within a potential agricultural area that's part of an annexation and protect the agricultural resources as part of annexation. The city has ag zoning, so the city can apply ag zoning to those areas. There were a number of potential impacts relating to biological resources, and there's a whole series of mitigations that are modifying policies or adding policies, and Dusty described those at a high level. You know, among the most, there's several that relate to project review, and it's sort of like the implementation that Dusty described that was put in for the Regional Water Quality Control Board to really disclose the process with project review to ensure that things aren't missed. So there's several policies which are saying the staff is going to rely on these data sources to ensure that there aren't biological resources that need to be considered with the development proposal. There was a policy that called for riparian area protections, creating a buffer around riparian areas in order to find impacts less than significant. The preparer specified a minimum buffer size. So inside that buffer, there's only a limited types of development, usually for resource protection or potentially for roads or utilities. But so new development isn't to occur within buffers. Buffers would be 100 feet for perennial streams, 50 feet for 100 feet for perennial and intermittent, 50 feet for intermittent, I'm sorry. And they specify buffers for wetlands as well. These buffers are ones that California Fish and Wildlife has accepted as reasonable throughout the North Coast region. I could go into more detail on the biological mitigations. I think we talked about them at the last meeting as well. Dusty described for cultural resources impacts, that they were potentially significant, and specifying the procedures for inadvertent encounters with resources and consultation and the process. For geology and soils, and for hazardous materials, and for wildfire. The analysis relied on the draft safety element that was prepared following the update to the hazard mitigation plan, which is not yet adopted. And so this is a mitigation that isn't going to be incorporated into the general plan. It's basically starting a clock saying that the city needs to adopt that In order for those policies to be available to lessen impacts to geology, soils, and that relate to hazards, including wildfire, that safety element will need to be adopted within 6 months of the adoption of the land use element. Same as it goes for hazardous materials and for wildfire, but the wildfire analysis found that the safety element was prepared prior to the newest state laws that specify how to lessen wildfire-related hazards. So the safety, prior to adoption, the safety element should be reviewed to ensure that it addresses the wildfire hazards to the greatest extent possible. The EIR, there were a number of topics that impacts were less than significant, and there's no need for mitigation. CEQA specifies other things that need to be addressed as part of an EIR, how energy use is minimized, whether or not there are growth-inducing impacts, or whether or not the project would result in significant irreversible environmental changes. You know, a whole bunch of resources dedicated to construction, things like that. These are disclosed in the EIR regarding growth-inducing impacts. You know, general plans are sort of growth accommodating, and they aren't in and of themselves typically considered growth-inducing. The EIR needed to consider alternatives to the project. State law requires that the no project alternative be considered, and the other alternatives are intended to lessen potential environmental impacts. So we proposed an alternative that was no expanded sphere of influence. It was the policy suite as it relates to mixed uses, making uses conforming, limiting incompatible uses, planning for Main Street and the Bechtel Road area. So all of those would apply, just no expanded sphere of influence. And CEQA also requires that you identify the environmental superior alternative, and it's not much of a surprise, but not expanding the sphere of influence would likely result in the least environmental impacts. However, the city isn't required to choose the environmentally superior alternative. You weigh the alternatives against the objectives of the plan, and one of the primary objectives of the plan is to create a mechanism so that you have you can expand the land supply as necessary, including going outside of the city, to so that you have an effective market for residential land in particular. And not expanding the sphere of influence didn't accomplish that project objectives. As I said at the beginning, in order to approve the land use element, you need to certify the EIR, and you need to make you need to make a series of findings. Those findings are a part of your staff report in a document called the Findings of Fact and Statement of Overriding Consideration, demonstrating that there's evidence to support the conclusions that are in the EIR. The Statement of Overriding Considerations is basically to balance balances the needs of the city regarding accommodating development and the significant non-avoidable impact, which is greenhouse gas emissions. The city only has limited control regarding greenhouse gas emissions, and you've incorporated a suite of policies, in particular the mixed-use development, the policies that highlight the planning for all modes of transportation, planning increasing allowable density where appropriate, and that these features and the land use map outweigh the potential greenhouse gas emissions impacts. And The actual impact is unknown. It could be that future emissions are consistent with state targets. We don't have enough information now, and the EIR is very conservative in that regard. The included within the final EIR and in the findings of fact and statement of overriding considerations is a mitigation and monitoring reporting program. And this has some similarities to the implementation action plan. It lists the mitigation, it lists the responsible party for ensuring its implementation, it lists how and when it gets implemented. Many of these are on an ongoing basis, project by project, and it's the community development department that's ensuring that the resources are protected or whatever the issue may be. But this is something that's approved by the city. It can be approved separate from the environmental impact report, so it's in the final EIR and the statement of overriding considerations. And that is the end of the CEQA topics. If you have any questions about the EIR or
you want to follow up, go ahead.
I just want to point out something that I think of as a real irony. So a lot of community members have asked me, where does this 7,500 persons idea come from? So this EIR, this general plan land use element is based on this expectation that Willits will grow by another 7,500 residents, which seems like a lot to most of us. Where did that number come from? And I think it's worth digging into this, which is a particularly fascinating document, to realize that that came from 1992 when our land use element was last updated. Based on the county and the city's growth rates at that time, it was estimated that Willits would grow by 7,500 persons. Up to, yes. It has not done that. In fact, Willits has shrunk over those years, and we are not seeing any appreciable increase in our population and don't expect to see any appreciable increase over the next 20 to 30 years if we look at historical data. But because nobody knows exactly what's going to happen over the 20 to 30 years, it's conservative to continue on track with that 7,500 number and try to plan for how we could mitigate that kind of growth. And that's why this plan is taking that sort of approach. We could get up to that many more people, so let's plan for it to make sure that we're using our land the way our community really wants it to be used. So the irony is that it's conservative to expand our SOI when in fact that could potentially have the greatest environmental impact on our community. I just think that's funny. So thank you for explaining all of this and for giving us the option to either not include the expand SOI or include it. My personal opinion is it makes more sense to include it as it is staying in track with that conservative estimate for growth that we're not likely to see.
Thank you, Greta. I really think you summed it up.
It took me a while to get through all of this.
I did neglect to discuss the comments in any detail, and I don't know that I don't know if there are particular comments you want me to talk about, but I would be happy to talk about the response to comments that's in the final EIR. Some of the comments and the response to comments were quite long. Some of them included additional meetings where between staff and the commenter to try and gain an understanding between the two. But I'd be happy to describe any of the response to comments if you'd like.
I think it would be appropriate at this time to allow some public input. And would council be staying for public input or?
Yes. On the CIR discussion, yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. So at this time, I'm going to welcome any members of the public that would like to come and address us on any of the two elements that you just heard a presentation on. Go ahead, ma'am. You can go first.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Tamara Alanis. I'm here on behalf of Brook Trails Township Community Services District. We were able to cooperatively work with staff, including Dusty and Rod, and we are happy with the result of what is moving forward tonight. And I am grateful to Dusty for his leadership and outreach to the community to produce this document. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Go ahead, ma'am.
I don't know.
Could, would you mind stepping up?
My name is Connie Hewitt, and I live on Locust Street at 1272. I would welcome a cleaning up of the deterioration of that portion from Walnut up to, you know, around the school and whatnot, on continuing south. We're seeing a tremendous traffic problem now. And so my concern is if we do low-density housing, or we do an apartment that houses 18, you know, different apartments, how does that get handled? Because we don't have police that are on duty at night, and we already have a great deal of noise in that neighborhood. We have a lot of speeding cars that never gets caught because there's not, you know, the force to take care of that. And just adding, I'm not opposed to growth at all, but I just don't see that we have addressed answers of how we would handle that much traffic. Like, for example, tonight while football practice is going on or soccer practice, there are vehicles parked on both sides, whereas they're supposed to be parked on one, and it means you have one lane through them. And you add that many more cars going and coming, and that's going to heavily impact us. So we also are aware of a situation with a rental property that's behind us where the water supply comes through thin PVC pipe. And, you know, if you put more cars driving in and out of that, you're going to have water breaks and huge water bills, which has already happened. So those are just concerns that we have. Totally in support of growth, that's not a problem, but how we address some of those adjacent issues just is a concern.
Dusty, are you able to address any of those directly, or city manager?
So I'll just start. We spoke on the phone, and I was able to have a good conversation and sort of understand how.
I know, that doesn't amplify.
Yeah, but I didn't have it turned on for there either, so. But just to start over again, we had a good conversation, you and your husband and I understand where you live, and you have some problematic neighbors. And
we do.
And call me again, because I was actually able to get some information from our building official and code compliance officer that you might appreciate hearing. Yeah, again, this is a policy document, so we're at a high level. And really, we're giving ourselves a heavy workload to look at updating the zoning code. And so, you know, if a housing development like apartments or duplexes or a single family home subdivision went in next to you or in your area, you know, there are city standards that we would apply to the project. If it's a subdivision, it's a discretionary deal, and we can put mitigations, you know, related to land use compatibility, neighborhood compatibility, all those kinds of things. You know, and I think I was even mentioning this to you is, you know, beyond this document, really getting involved in talking about apartment complex regulations, taking a look at what we have now, and offering up some suggestions or ideas on how we might be able to strengthen them to ensure that, you know, there's less issues with compatibility between, you know, different various density residential developments. I think for you personally, your problem seems to be more with the neighborhood, and maybe if these changes that we have in here can actually spur some development, hopefully it actually might make life a little bit easier for you. But when it comes to ensuring utilities and proper driveways and access, we have city standards in place that we would be looking at and applying to any type of development, whether it was permitted by right or discretionary.
And the other thing that was mentioned was the possibility of a group home. And with schools, both the junior high school and the elementary school there, you know, I just would like some reassurance that you would look very carefully at the type of group home. Like, you know, if it's a drug halfway house from a program or whatever, individuals that just might create more of a nuisance. And the driveway coming out from that land behind us is right up alongside our home. And so, you know, that's also an impact. I don't know what the zoning is in terms of the distance, but we already get a lot of noise from that. So I say here for the planning that has gone on, very careful considerations. And there are also a few other issues that would be greatly affected by the changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For clarification, the area that we're speaking of right now, would the zoning allow for example, mental health group housing?
So so we're going to be following up with the zoning map to capture the land use diagram changes. So right now, that area, it's some industrial as you come off of Walnut, and then it turns into single-family residential as you travel further south on Locust Street. Again, we're talking about the area on the west side of Locust there, from Walnut on down to the next intersection. The allowed residential uses as far as like supportive housing, transitional housing, farm worker housing's in there. Again, residential care homes, 6 or fewer. State law mandates that we allow that. That's not going to change when we go from low density to medium density residential.
Okay.
Where group home falls in that, I kind of need to get some more information. But if it fell under supportive or transitional housing, residential care home, that's typically for more elder ages, but it would be allowed. It is allowed now, and it would still be allowed if it fell under one of those categories.
And that's by state law, right?
That's by state law, yeah.
Thank you for that follow-up.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
So, you heard the response regarding long-range planning. I will work with Interim Chief Chris Duley to apply law enforcement resources to your neighborhood. We have coverage. We can just.
Including the bus? He goes flying by at 50 miles an hour.
Noted. We'll address it.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any members of the public that want to address us on the presentation that haven't spoke yet? Go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Lucy Bartholomew. I think I know a lot of folks here, and first of all, Dusty, congratulations on finishing this plan. This is a big effort. Oh yeah, sorry. Don't want to jinx anything, but yeah, so I'm a public policy advocate for the Blue Zones project, and I've also lived just outside of Willits city limits for 12 years now. And before I do the job part of my public policy advocacy, I just want to admire not only like the breadth of input, of community input, but just now this interaction, I just am so proud of living in a small town where folks give so much care to the individuals, like going through the different parcels and saying who owns that, and everyone nods their heads and knows. I think that's really impressive. And I'm eating up an awful lot of my time. But I just wanted to acknowledge the protections of agricultural land that I heard and saw, and I know I can speak. I chair the Mendocino County Food Policy Council, and I know that our council members will be very reassured to hear that, and I know that concerns about encroachment on agricultural land have come up as a concern, and it is, of course, part of the heritage of our community as well. The other thing is to amplify, Sabrina, Mayor Rodriguez, sorry, to amplify your comment about walkability throughout Willits. And I heard you mention that. I wasn't able to be here on September 11th. I had another conflict, but I'm curious if that's codified in the update, or if there's more to be done there. But I love to see codification of those policies of walkable things.
At community meetings and committee meetings, there's been lots of conversation about walkability, and I'll let Dusty, if you would like to maybe address that a little further.
It's in here under complete streets.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
that's exactly what I wanted.
When I read this.
Yes, it is in there.
Appreciate that. Great.
Do you want to summarize though?
Yeah, so. So yes, we do have the direction, the policy direction to implement complete streets policy and bring that into city code.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks. I hope to be a resource in that implementation.
I'm hoping you will be too. Yeah, thank you.
There's been lots of discussion about complete streets. All of us have advocated for complete streets. So just know that the council shares that that value and has been holding feet to the fire, saying we want this, and the city staff has really heard us and done their work in implementing it in each document that we're working on.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can say one other thing, and I do believe I'm past my time. Okay.
One more comment's okay.
Okay. This is actually from a personal perspective, and I absolutely understand the concern about group homes and folks who are in early recovery. It stands out to me that any recovery programs within city limits for drug and alcohol or mental health issues are mitigating public nuisance, even though it does concentrate them temporarily. And I'm not saying that to dismiss your concerns about it. I'm just adding that perspective, which I think we're all on board for, but I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. This last call, anybody else from the public? All right, hearing none, I'm going to bring it back up here to the dais. Did you have a
Yeah,
comment?
I wanted, oops, is it on? Maybe it's been on all this time. I wanted to ask John Miller about just sort of a high-level overview of if we ever got close to that 7,500 population, what are the comments, the most recent exchanges about our ability to serve that with water and wastewater treatment?
The EIR found that the wastewater system is designed has been designed for that. There may be improvements that are required to accommodate that when it occurs in the future, and that all of those improvements would be subject to CEQA, and that's part of how they found that impacts were less than significant. Regarding water, the analysis identified the city's surface water rights that are permitted through the state and the access to the groundwater. And it may not have highlighted the city's policies regarding the use of the groundwater, but the findings were that the city has surface water rights, has the ability to expand the capacity of surface water storage, and has access to groundwater, the treatment of which could be permitted through the state, and that impacts would be less than significant. But I guess the preparers of the EIR acknowledge that the use of the groundwater is a city decision, and the city has some policy regarding that. And the city may need, if there is significant growth, the city in the future may need to revisit its policies regarding the use of groundwater.
My reason to just ask that, to be aware in the public, is that there have been concerns raised about if we start relying more heavily on the groundwater as a source, that we might run the risk of having some of the contaminants from around the region get sucked into our water supply, and that is something we really want to avoid. And it's something that would take a long time to know if it was happening, so we have to be proactively protecting from running that risk.
Madam Mayor, if I may respond as well.
Yes.
To increase capacity of our water program may not necessarily include groundwater usage as well. There's provisions to increase capacity at the reservoirs so that we can rely on our predominant system as well. Okay.
If there's one more thing I could say on the 7,500, so the general plans for a maximum population of 7,500 within the planning period, and the EIR evaluated that population to the extent that, which seems to me to be unforeseeable at this time, but during the planning period, if the population looks like it's going to exceed 7,500, you'd need to amend your general plan to accommodate the population beyond that.
Vice Mayor Gonzalez?
Actually, more of a comment for John and Dusty that I actually really enjoyed reading. I know I never thought I'd say that regarding the environmental impact report, but when you had the comments and then you were able to respond back, and then ultimately the mitigations, I mean, it read really well. And as I'd read the comments and go, yeah, and then I'd go over and go, oh, okay, and I found myself going back and forth, and it was well written, and I appreciated it. It felt to me that we listened to our community and that we were able to respond, and that part I really appreciate. So, and again, I'll tell you, when I graduated high school in '82, and that's why I laughed when Greta talked about the 7,500, that I truly thought back then that we would be closer to this because things were growing back then, and then all of a sudden I saw the big shrink, and so yeah, I thought that was funny.
I'm really proud of the fact that this council and city staff has worked really hard on this, and that we've gotten to where we are. I know that many years went by without moving forward, and this is an accomplishment, and it's an accomplishment that has come about through many meetings and conversations with the public to ensure that we're really coming up with a plan that fits as best as possible with what our community's needs are today and planning into the future. So, yeah, thank you. All right, I think we are at the decision point of the meeting. So, how would you like to handle this?
So we have a separate resolution on the EIR, correct? And we're going to
Yes.
Request that a motion be made to approve adoption of the EIR.
I'll move to adopt the EIR.
I'll second.
All right. Any final input from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Connie? Yes. Strong?
Yes.
Stransky?
No.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez?
Yes, motion carries 4-1 on adoption of the EIR.
So the presentation next, I believe staff is recommending, is that the council consider adoption of a resolution approving the land use element update, and that will be segmented, as we discussed earlier, into 3 different resolutions. The first one will address the planned Main Street mixed use proposal, and council members who have homes or properties on Main Street, that would be council members Connie and Stransky, staff would recommend their recusal. There's nothing derogatory about the word recusal. It just simply means that you leave the room and you don't participate. But that occurs after the staff presentation, after council members' questions and answers on that presentation, and then also following public comments. When the matter comes back then to the dais for council consideration, discussion, and vote, that's the point that we ask for recusal.
Is that now?
Correct. So now, now is the time for the staff presentation on the mixed use
And comments.
Do you have more to add?
Okay, so just I guess a little bit, I feel pressure to say something here. So obviously we're creating a new downtown mixed-use district that's essentially applying to downtown from about Main Street intersection with Oak Street, going north past the intersection with State Street up against where the railroad for reasons provided by the city attorney, we're pulling just the vote on creating they're creating that designation as
The
well
downtown mixed
as
use.
well as applying that to the land use map.
So it would be appropriate now to have discussions, I believe, on what that mixed use anticipates and what, I understood that the residential potential is a main component of the potential mixed use for that.
I think you got it, Jim. You want to keep going?
No?
No? Well, okay, I mean, we discussed this
we've gone-
before. Yeah,
we've
I
gone
mean, if
through
there
it
are
pretty
any
thoroughly.
questions from council, we're happy to try to answer them.
I think I'll open it up to the public, because we've heard it many times. And if there's any questions about this next section, we're talking about mixed use on the Main Street downtown area. If you have any concerns about that, now would be the time to ask any clarifying questions. And if you'd like to, you can step up to the podium. Okay.
At this point, I'm going to recuse myself, so I'm going to leave the room. I own property on Main Street, so I don't want to unduly sway the vote.
Okay.
I'm in the same boat. My property, I have 422 feet from the park. That's it. Thank you.
This one's on Main Street, though.
I just wanted to point out that another key policy that's in, well, two actually, is that we would be looking at very flexible parking requirements and ways to solve that problem without imposing full compliance with all the parking that would normally be required for a new or expanded use along Main Street, because there really aren't any. That whole area is almost impossible to provide more parking without tearing down buildings, and we don't want to do that. So I think that's a very important element that we've been looking at with that. And the other thing is this recent addition of wanting to keep out formula or big box kinds of stores in that area. I think that that's going to be, both of those things are going to be really challenge to write into the zoning code, but they're definitely policies that I think we have been talking about, and I certainly support those in theory. It's just to get down to the zoning code, it's going to be a challenge.
Well, I think mixed use is important in the downtown area, because we just talked about walkable communities, and being able to have a mix of residential and business together makes for a more walkable community, and that's why I would support it. Did you want to add?
I just wanted to clarify, and even though you have property on Main Street, this part of Main Street that we're talking about is separate. I wanted to just...
Downtown.
Yeah, downtown. So I wanted to make sure that everybody kind of...
I hadn't thought about that, but yes.
Yeah, I got to thinking about that. People might go, why didn't she step out? So I thought that I would just add that...
We no longer have a forum.
Yeah, well, then we'd end up in that weird rule where somebody had to come in. But no, I think that the whole idea of being able to live and work where your business is, et cetera, is great. If that such a thing can happen for somebody, that'd be great. So.
All right, we're at the point if anyone would like to make a motion.
Well, do we
Yes.
have public comment on the?
Did I do public?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe we did do public.
We have somebody that
comment.
wants to.
But I'll open it up if somebody would like to, something came to mind.
Yeah.
Oh, we already did.
Yeah.
Okay.
We did,
Just
but
Mark Walker.
it's okay.
I just wanted a little clarification, because you're telling me it's going from Oak Street up to where the old railroad used to cross, where they had the sleeping quarters for SP. Now, is that on the north side of Oak or the south side of Oak? So on the south side, you're talking the old country skillet and all that, or just this side of the north? That'd be a big factor right there with your use.
Yeah,
Sure, no problem. Go ahead, shoot an answer, yes or no.
Flip that street right there.
Which one? I don't know.
You can't see.
We'll be my spy out.
Can you verbally respond?
So, yeah, I can. So, and actually, it's good that he asked that, because it's It's gonna be, it's both sides of the street.
Okay.
And it's, what's the street that's north of Oak Street on Main Street there?
Alameda?
Alameda. So it's actually, the southern extent of the downtown mixed use goes to the north side of Alameda, all the way up to above State Street where the tracks cross. So previously I said Oak Street, I want to correct myself, it's Alameda.
Thank you. But it's both sides of the street is the point.
Oh.
That's really the point. Okay.
Closing public comment?
Anybody else from the public? Okay. We're going to move on. Thank you for your participation.
So I will move approval of the portion of the land use element that relates to the mixed use Main Street.
So if I could just add, it would be resolution number 2024, and then their last number hasn't been identified. It's a resolution of the City Council of the City of Willits adopting the Main Street mixed-use component of the general plan land use element, an element of the City of Willits' general plan.
Right.
No.
And I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I'll call for the vote. No.
You just note their abstention.
Council members. Strong. Strong. Yes. Gonzalez.
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes. All right, the motion carries 3-0. And again, we've broken this up into 3 parts to allow council members to participate in other elements of the plan. All right, Jim, we're moving on to the second part.
Yes, so we need our other council members to join us.
Yes.
So they would join us, and then one of them is going to have to, no, because you have,
Yes.
you're part of this one that we have to step
Which,
out.
the element we're
Cleanup.
using.
This is the cleanup. This is,
The cleanup of the,
your property on Main Street is going to change zoning, isn't it? So is mine. I'm facing this way. So both of us have to leave, so.
we're both out on this one?
Yes, you are, but not until it comes back to you.
Yeah, but who's going to lead one of the other council members then takes over the meeting?
I'm going to open it up for public comment for a resolution which is called the Cleanup Land Use Designation to 214 non-conforming improved parcels of real property within the city as a component of the land use element of the City of Willits' general plan. And at this time, if you would like to address us on that specific portion. I know it's a little confusing, so if you just want to step up and ask a question, that's okay as well. All right, hearing none.
Can I just add some explanation?
Yeah, go ahead.
Some of the properties that we're talking about were zoned commercial and now are going to R1, which is residential. And are any going the other way, Dusty?
Yeah, so there are a handful of properties that are going the other way, and and I think we modified the resolution to say it wasn't exclusively going to residential land use designations for cleanups, and as the mayor stated, there's approximately 214 properties where the longstanding land use doesn't match with the zonings, and there's some issues that are involved with that, and so these cleanup changes are being identified for the benefit of the property owner. And there's been hundreds of discussions with those owners to explain that. And we've gone over it, it's in the staff report and all that. But yeah, it goes both ways to answer your question. Sometimes the changes to commercial industrial to match the longstanding land
I
use.
just figured the public should know why we.
Yes. And both the mayor, myself, and vice mayor have a conflict of interest. So I'm going to turn it over to Greta Connie because she was the prior mayor, and you'll be handling this resolution.
I'm just looking to see do we actually have the wording for what the...
Yes, it's on page, let's see.
You can give her that if you want.
I can just pass this over because Jerry's already got it up.
Okay.
And in my case, I have a piece of property I'm a co-owner of on East San Francisco Street that's zoned commercial, and it's going to go to residential.
All right, so, I guess I should wait till they're in the other room. Does council have any questions to clarify what this potential resolution would be? Larry, Madge? Okay. I'm going to open it up to the public. Does anyone have questions about the resolution to adopt cleanup land use designations within city limits? Yes. If you could come up to the podium, state your name.
Okay, my name is Chad Crossway. I live at 266 North Main Street, across the street from the high school. I'm coming in super late to the game. All of you know what's going on, and I don't. So I'm commercial residential, and this is saying that I think that you're going to make me just residential, and that's what you're going to vote on right now, if that's what I'm understanding.
Dusty, can you clarify at that address?
Yeah, you said 266 North Main Street?
Yeah, it's just right across the street, right?
Yeah, you're currently zoned residential, I believe.
It's commercial residential.
I don't know what commercial residential is. Wait, hold on. Well, I got the right property here at the base of Sherwood Road on the north side of the intersection.
Your map sucks.
I can, let me zoom out, yeah.
Oh, this, yeah, the little sliver right there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have it on there too? I don't know that we're proposing a change on that.
I have a letter if you want it.
Oh,
Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I don't mean to be wasting all your
No,
time
no,
or
this
whatever.
is what it's for.
Right.
Give personal service.
Right, right. So, yes.
Just so you don't feel bad, I had multiple people come and talk to me over the past week about their letters and wanting questions answered. So you're totally within your rights, and it's important
okay.
that you understand what's happening to your zoning.
Yeah,
so.
totally, and I don't, like I say, I don't want to.
No. This is the forum for exactly this.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the current use on your property?
Both residential and commercial.
Okay, what's the commercial use?
Sorry. Well, she opened up a business, a dog wash business.
Okay. Yeah, so gentleman is correct. It currently has a commercial zoning, and based on the records that we have, we understood it was being used for residential purposes only, and so we, identified that as a cleanup to match what we understood. But obviously what we're hearing is that there is a commercial activity happening there, and maybe what you're wanting to say is that I'd like to keep my commercial zoning?
I would.
Okay.
I don't.
So that's certainly possible. So how do we address that within the confines of the resolution? If a property owner would like to reject the rezone for their particular property, what is the mechanism?
You can.
And then just before also getting some clarification here, the dog washing business, is that did you get like a when you got your business license, was it done as like a home occupation?
It was done as just like a minor, like, it's just really small. We had limitations on employees and just like that, just him and I can run it type of deal. And then it went through all the departments except for, I think we're just waiting for one final sign off.
Okay, so that's why we didn't catch it, because it's brand new.
Like,
Okay.
we're trying to catch it before, because we know that there's a need for it in the community that's been presented as a good need. So
Yeah.
we're just trying to catch it before it goes, and while the paperwork is still going through.
Yeah, like they said, it's kind of last minute here, but we're having the conversation live, and this is like many conversations we had, so you kind of see it in process here. It sounds like it's something that could fall under like the home occupation guidelines that currently exist, that we also got policy to kind of look and expand and identify more opportunities to allow those really, innocent opportunities to have sort of a small commercial activity even in a residential zoning. I don't want to give that definitive answer on the spot in a public hearing in front of everybody, but it may be that something like that would be consistent even with a residential zoning. Just to kind of talk to you a little bit about the potential benefit of the residential zoning. From talking to realtors, property owners, lenders, prospective buyers, we understand that there can be issues when you have a non-conforming use on your property, like a residence in a commercial zoning. And we understand that there can be issues with when you're trying to borrow money against the property. So this could be beneficial in that sense, where you have equity in your property, you're going to borrow against it. when you have a commercial zoning and you're barring against a non-conforming use, that's planning jargon, meaning your home is completely legal in the zoning, but it's non-conforming.
Right.
Because it's commercial, right? Or if you're looking to sell your property, whoever's trying to buy it, when they're going to struggle to get a conventional loan against
Right.
it. So that's really why this was identified, these cleanup changes as a benefit to property owners.
Oh, okay.
So just,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. Awesome.
So my question
Yeah, and then John wanted to add too when it was appropriate.
Go ahead, John.
I think we sort of recognized that issues like this may come up with, it's a balancing act, applying land uses that reflect the uses that appear to be going on. There's a policy grouping called land use compatibility and flexibility, and within that, there's two policies. One, which is zoning flexibility. I mean, there are new zones that are going to be mixed-use zones, but also looking at the sort of the exclusive use zones and seeing to what degree flexibility can be provided there, plus one called support home-based businesses. So within residential areas, expand the use of home occupation-related businesses that don't have a detrimental impact on the neighbors that people might not notice. So
Right.
it's sort of coming at it both directions, but recognizing that there could be issues like with what you're describing.
Okay, appreciate it.
So I suppose the question is, for the city manager and the city attorney, is should these residents, do they need to make their decision tonight whether or not they'd like to accept the zoning, and then if they choose not to, do we carve them out of this? What is the process for that?
Well,
Go ahead, Brian.
so essentially, yes, it's kind of a spur of the moment. If there's a motion made, the motion can have an element to amend the resolution to identify this parcel. I don't know if you have the APN there, and then we can do the legal, the postal address or the street address and just reference that into the resolution. If you really, the owner can come back at a later time, but they're gonna be carrying the burden of doing the public hearing and the notification. It's easier to do it now and group it in with everyone else, the other 214 parcels. There, it is to your benefit, but, you know, once again, we're not trying to pressure you.
Okay.
So Dusty and the comments were directly on spot. If act of God destroyed your property, piece of space junk came down, took out your house,
Yeah.
insurance is going to say no, because they want to make sure there's equity and protection of their investment, whatever they lend or reestablish on the property. So you may have problems claiming an insurance reimbursement to reestablish that home.
For residents in a commercial
Yeah.
district, in a commercial zoning.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay. It's all a lot
Yeah.
of information.
Yeah.
Can I just add, are we talking about like just taking away the residential part and just keeping it commercial though?
No, no. So,
Oh, okay.
so basically what we're doing is the use on your property is residential. That's the primary use.
Yes.
And what we want to do through this episode is confirm that through our zoning process. The use on ground is a residence, and for our zoning purposes, it's going to be identified in a residential district. So the use and the zoning classification is in sync.
Okay. And you're saying that you can have a small dog wash business and that's totally fine. It's not a big problem. But you can't actually say that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
So-
That was perfect.
That was perfect. Yeah, I mean, listen, your property's currently zoned commercial, and you have a business license with us, so when the zone changes, anything if you have a non-conforming business, that carries over and is legal. So what you might be doing, again, we'll try to work with you with the home occupation. We're pretty good about trying to make things wit, but obviously no promises here. But what might be happening here is if you do go to the residential zoning, you're trading a non-conforming house for a non-conforming dog washing business. So,
And as far as your insurance and potential refinancing options go, it might behoove you to go with residential rather than commercial is the information that you were getting from
I
us.
got you. Okay, that's all wonderful information, and sorry for taking my time again. I'm like, I just showed up. She's like, we should go to this meeting, and I'm glad that I did.
So I don't mean to rush you, but we do need to know, in order for us to make a resolution, to make a motion tonight, we do need to know what your choice is. If you would like us to carve out your AP number so that you're not included in this zone change, or if you would like to go ahead and be included. I hate to put you on the spot, but we need to know.
Greta?
Yeah.
We were in that same situation when we were over on,
Hit your microphone on.
we were in that same situation when we were over on South Street over there on the Victorian. And the thing that bothered us was that you could live in the house, but if you went for a loan, it was a totally different amount of money. I mean, it's terrible versus what you have is just a residential. And I know that for a fact because the bank told us that, and this is what we did. We just had the business. And I lived upstairs, which is perfectly legal, but you still have to pay the money.
Banks are typically much more willing to loan on residences because it's an asset that they can take and sell. Businesses are kind of a big question mark for them, so they're less likely to give you money on them, to refinance, to help you with a seller, all of that.
Right.
Thank you all for your patience. I think we can all, I feel like if we were in their shoes, we'd hope for a little bit of grace. So.
We just got a letter like 4 days ago. That's a huge decision.
Absolutely, right. And I feel bad like putting them on the spot.
Like on a game show.
Yeah, exactly. Ding, ding, ding.
So yeah, so we'll just do the residential.
You're going to make that choice tonight?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you
Well,
so much.
that simplifies my motion, which is to accept the...
Mayor, or, sorry, not mayor, my bad.
Acting temporary.
So temporary-ish, yeah. So there was one other, and I think this was a cleanup zoning, parcel 007-040-01. This is a property on the south side of East Valley Street, east of South Lenore Avenue. It's an error on the land use map. It shows that it's being changed to R2, and actually it should be changed to R1. The notice that went out to the property owner, both the one recently this month as the one that went out in, I think, June, did show the correct proposed change. However, it's an error on the land use map. So I want to point that out.
And is the property owner okay with the proposed change?
Presumably so, because the notice said R1 and not R2.
And they haven't made any comments or?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. Go ahead, Madge.
Okay, so I'm going to move, I don't have the thing, the resolution in front of me, but to the cleanup portion, there we go. Adopting the cleanup land use designations to 214 non-conforming improved parcels, real property within the city as a component of the land use element. So
A second.
thank you.
All right, I'm going to close to the public unless there are any last minute comments. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Dolores, may we have a roll call?
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Can we call the mayor back in, take me out of the hot seat? This is for Jerry.
The next action we can all vote on.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Find out.
So the first two matters that you voted on, the first two resolutions were carve-outs of the land use element. And so we dealt with those separately because of the conflicts of a couple of council members. So what remains is the land use element without those two aspects in it. It's the balance of the land use element consisting of the policies and the general mixed use element as well. Dusty, anything else that we need to address?
Yeah, so not the general mixed use, but the Main Street mixed use was correct, was broken out. And so now what you're doing is adopting the rest of the entirety of the land use element, including the land use diagram.
And the general mixed use, right?
Well, I can go over everything that's in there, but it's everything but the two things that we
All
pulled
other
out.
properties within the center
Yes.
of Willits.
And all of it.
On that previous action, I should have mentioned that with the correction shown, that you will correct that map error.
Yes.
Thank you for your patience as we navigate this when we're tackling a project that, or a plan that encompasses so much of Willits and we all live here. But we're trying very hard to be transparent and follow the rules. Okay, so we're on the final resolution of the City Council to adopt the general plan land use element with the remainder. Basically, it says, whereas the identification of a planning area that includes the city as well as surrounding lands that bears relation to city planning. It changes to existing law, a new land element use policy intended to expand the land supply for housing of all types. It also changes to land use designations and proposed expansions. And with that, are there any members of the public that would like to address us on the final element? All right, would anyone like to make a motion?
Well, before I make a motion, I wanted to ask if there would be support for removing that one extension that's...
wooded.
Yeah, the wooded rectangle that's just north of Highway 20, but not fronting on Highway 20, that we pointed out.
Have you spoken to that property owner?
I haven't. I spoke to Dusty about that, and he said that they haven't come forward with an actual plan. And of course, it's not annexed at this point, it's just a SOI. All of that would have to come back if there is a proposal for the use of that property before they would actually be taking any action or annexing it. So it's really just a question of whether it makes sense to us to have that potentially on the future docket that we could look to expand into that extra wooded area. And to me, it doesn't make sense to do it. So I guess I would propose an amendment. And I don't feel really strongly about it because I think there's a lot of protection in place. It's way down the road. It's not, any kind of final decision. It just seems to me the wrong message to send to have low density into that wooded area.
I think based on the comments that Dusty made that it might not be within the best interest of the city to include that in the SOI, I am willing to exclude that as well.
Would either of you like to make a formal motion?
I'll so move.
I'll second.
Okay. Are we clear on the motion? Okay. All right, I will call for the vote.
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez?
Yes. The motion for this resolution carries 5-0.
Okay, so I guess I thought I was just motioning the change, but that's okay.
It was this with the change, is what you thought?
Okay, yeah, the whole thing with the change, okay.
Are we agreed?
As long as everybody's vote was intended to be that, I'm fine with
That was what we understood.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay.
I didn't see Dusty doing don't, so we...
Mayor?
Yes.
I just want to say a quick congratulations to Community Development. Thank you so much for your tremendous work.
Thank you, Plan West.
Yes,
absolutely.
All right. And I did want to say, too, earlier, I didn't want to interrupt you, but you had talked about lots of plans that were put on the shelf. And I was thinking about, just in the last 4 years, how many plans we've taken off of the shelf and revisited and updated them. And the planning department has been working very hard on ensuring that nothing sits on the shelf. That they're all action.
She's not getting dusty.
No.
I do play in the dirt every once in a while, but just to acknowledge the hard work that Plan West did. They were absolutely the right team for this, and their dedication to this project is really unmatched with any other group that I've ever got to work with, and you both should be very proud of what you helped the city accomplish. And having said that, I'm grateful that our contract still continues with Plan West, where we start pulling this fresh document off the shelf and beginning with the zoning code implementation. So you'll see us back early next year with the zoning map and working on creating the mixed-use zoning districts, as well as what you brought up, Councilmember Strong, with looking at the off-street parking requirements. So, yeah, thank you.
All right. We'll see you in the coming months. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much.
All right, moving on to the next order of business, enactment of ordinances. We have done before us.
Oh, there's the
You still have two other
Oh,
public hearings.
emergency operation.
Sorry, moving along too quickly. That was only item,
3B now.
yes.
Optimistic.
I know, sorry. Okay, moving on to item 3B, which is the public hearing, so I'm opening the hearing, to adopt the 2024 Emergency Operations Plan Part 2, Flood Response Annex, as an addition to the Emergency Operation Plan Part 1 Base Plan. And our presenting staff member will be Logan Shine. He's our contract planner.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and Council members. I'm Logan Shine with Land Logistics. This evening I'll be presenting the resolution to adopt the proposed scopes of the Willits Emergency Operations Plan Part 3 Fire. Oh, this is not the right. Okay.
Part 2.
Okay, so I will go without the slideshow because we do not have the slideshow for this particular item. I will adjust my notes real quick to get to the audio version of this.
It's on the website, right? You could. Oh, it's not? Oh, his PowerPoint versus this.
Okay, so apologize to the audience for the lack of visuals. The background on this is that the Flood Response Annex was developed under the Community Development Department with funding from a Prop 84 grant from Division of Water Resources Statewide Flood Emergency Response Grant, Round 3, which was available in 2018 to 2022. A third-party consultant, KSN, was contracted to create the hazard-specific flood response annex, flood flight command manual, and a public safety maps for emergency response and incident management. Alignment with state, county, and local systems. This plan was designed to integrate the Strategic Emergency Management System, County Operational Area Plan, the Multi-Jurisdiction Hazard Mitigation Plan, Willits EOP Part 1 Basic Plan, as well as referencing the draft 2019 Willits Safety Plan element. The vulnerabilities in the local responsibility area are identified as dams and creeks. Dams, the inundation to the dam failure, floodwaters would be confined to the 100-year floodplain, impacting northeastern parts of the city and adjacent unincorporated areas. For creeks, Mill, Broadus, Bechtel, and Davis Creeks are vulnerable to flooding from substantial rainfall and blockages impeding the flow of the streams, such as under bridges and through culverts. Undersized or underperforming drainage facilities further contribute to localized flooding and one of the vulnerabilities to recovery is records of our improvements on our land. So all that is in community development, and that is integral in having a good recovery as a response to be able to document what monetary amounts of damages that we can assess right away when we declare an emergency and ask the governor for assistance. In the emergency operations, once it's activated, or before it's activated, Willits Police, Little Lake Fire District, and Willits School District admin will be alerted to an anticipated disaster, which would be notified to us through the National Weather Service and National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, as well as Mendocino County operational area if an intense storm is expected. The Willits EOC is activated when the flood monitoring employees record water levels at pre-established triggers at key areas in the city. The Willits Emergency Operations Center will coordinate emergency noticing through the Nixle and Mendo alerts with the county EOC. The local Emergency Operations Center facilitates expanded field response through coordination with partner agencies to supply our frontline responders. During a flood emergency, the Emergency Operations Director is the entity authorized to order an evacuation of threatened areas within the city's jurisdiction. Police would be the ones carrying out the actual controlling ingress and egress to the affected areas as well. And here's where the public safety map that is included in the plan identifies local strategic flood response, such as the localized flooding potential, controlled intersections, points for rallying our manpower, command post for our actual administration, logistics and supply staging to support the frontline ICS, technical facilities, helispot, mass care location identified as the high school, as well as locating where gas station services would be, and general evacuation routes and ingress controls. It also identifies response action triggers, so something that would activate a level 1 hazard would be 2 inches or more rainfall predicted in a 24-hour period. Stage 2, when evacuations would more than likely already have been carried out and the city will have been responded, is when flood would start topping bridges. So specifically East Commercial Street, North Lenore, the bridge on Brodus Creek. That would be okay, before we get to that point, that area is already evacuated east of Lenore and south along Lenore to East Valley. Flood Flight Command Manual that was designed for this outlines organization and response and provides documentation forms for briefing, organization, clarifying objectives, establishing the communication protocols, and reentry protocols. And documentation is the key to cost recovery. So as soon as the ground responders start responding, the EOC is going to be looking at how do we recover from this already. We will have emergency workers doing evacuations, but this is where community development, as well as our services and facilities, and any other departments or local public agencies, as well as our local nonprofits, would want to be involved in creating damage assessments in our initial outreach to the governor. To say that we anticipate so much damage, this is our initial estimate, and then we'll continue to gather information to support our requests for aid and recovery funds. So. And without visuals, that was the presentation. So do we have questions?
Yeah, I think for all of you, you just really want to know what's going to happen if there's a flood. And if you go to the Appendix A in the packet, it's got your flood immediate action checklist. And what you want to know is that the city is going to activate their Emergency Operations Center. They'll establish situational awareness with the police department, Willits Services and Facility Department, and other partners. Then they'll provide a warning to everyone about the situation and confer within the departments about how to address the matter and render mutual aid and mobilize, allocate, and position personnel so that they can address the situation, and then document flood damage and so on, and coordinate with the federal response. So it's a plan that talks about step by step what the checklist would be, who would be the chain of command, what the tasks would be, and who the partner agencies would be. Does that pretty much summarize it too?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, if anybody's interested, I've got what's in the packet, but it's also online. If you want to look at it here, I'm willing to let everybody look at it. But otherwise, you follow the link and it's literally on the website. I honestly, Logan, what I really appreciated with this, I really would like to see one for fire that does this, exactly this, and has that. I know that during our fires, Dusty and I sat around and we were planning on evacuation routes. And I think when I read both of these, I was just really impressed that this is the meat and potatoes kind of stuff. That when you're out there as a public safety person trying to plan evacuations and such, and you want to give some of the logistical folks kind of the blueprint, this is what you hold up and say, here you go, follow this while we go and start doing our job. And even if I grabbed one of you and said, you're going to help answer phones and tell you what, tell people this is what we're doing. And this is exactly what I wanted to see. And so I was really impressed with this.
Go ahead.
Thank KSN.
I wanted to echo Vice Mayor Gonzalez's comments. I think this is great. I love the specificity of it. And it just really made me, to me, it really drove home the point. This is the city's emergency action plan in the case of a flood. And hopefully all of our residents are also thinking of their own home emergency plan. And that's the best way we can be good Willits citizens. We can know that our city is taking care of its infrastructure, and we are each taking care of our home and getting our family rallied and where we're gonna go and get out of trouble. So I love that the city has this. It makes me feel good, and it spurs me to make sure my family has a plan.
Okay.
Did it go back to 1963 about the flood that Willits had?
Pardon me, that might be a good question for community development.
Dusty, are you aware of that?
Was it 64, Larry?
I think it was 64.
It was 63, 64, yeah. It was Christmas, approximately.
I'm not aware in the planning documents that created this plan for 2022. I'm not aware of the history that went into the planning phases, but if it coincides with the multi-jurisdiction hazard mitigation plan that the county had done, then I would say yes.
Okay, you say it, but nothing happened from the county.
Back in the 60s.
In 60s.
Yes.
So I'm hesitant to, and I know this is a good plan and everything is great, but if everything doesn't work out like the paper says, you're in trouble, or we're in trouble, I'll put it that way.
Well, the good news is we're making a plan, right?
Well, I'm sure there was a plan at that particular time too, but Jerry was here,
Larry, I was born in 1964. Probably after the flood.
On that one. But actually, what we had is a log jam at the north end of town, and the water didn't go anyplace other than there. It just kept building up. And that's why they call it Little Lake Valley. So that's history, but that's the things that happened, and you couldn't hardly go anywhere.
And
Madam Mayor, if I may?
Yes.
I just want to respond. I believe the 1964 flood was considered the flood of record. So when FEMA came back and did modeling of flood dynamics, that was the baseline. So the conditions you just described were identified in subsequent flood regulations and mapping episodes.
Okay.
So yes, it did not get lost in through mist of time.
And through the chair, to address Councilman Stronsky's concern about being ready with this. Apparently a tabletop exercise was practiced with this in 2022, but tabletop exercises should be done annually so that everyone is familiar with the plan that has to work with it. So that is a good point, and that is something that we would like to do moving forward.
Well,
And we've talked about ensuring too, you remember, about how making sure that our city staff was doing emergency planning.
never mind, that's okay. Nobody's considerate about that. I lived through that, the rest of the, Jerry didn't live through it either. Well, his parents did.
Yeah.
I'm just too old. Go ahead.
Thank you for your comment.
All right. Thank you. I think it's good to have a plan. It's good for each of us to have an individual plan as well as a city plan. And I can see that a lot of work did go into this. Even the inventory list of making sure that and being prepared that the city has things that are available, for example, sandbags and things like that, that we've thought ahead and made sure that we have those types of resources available to community members. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address us on this item? Go ahead, sir.
Okay,
If you could step up here, though.
So I believe what Mr. Strensky's talking about would be called Outlet Creek right there at the trestle, the train tracks go out. You plug that trestle, this valley floods, right?
Yep.
So you fill it full, and it's working the railroad for all the years. That Outlet Creek's been a troubled spot with a lot of overgrowth and stuff, and you didn't get much drainage that way. It just plugged. And so they came in and built the highway in and everything, and it drains faster now because they're keeping it clear. But if that happens to get plugged, you're going to be 2 feet in water, easy. Here at Claddy's Corner, it can go up to 4 or 5 feet. So you got to be thinking those kind of things. And as far as an emergency reaction, that's what you're thinking about. It's the worst possible scenario. There's a lot of overgrowth and underbrush and everything, just plug something up.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? All right, I'm going to close the public portion and bring it back up here to the dais we have before us.
I would like to make a motion adopting the resolution to approve Emergency Operations Plan Part 2 Flood Response Annex.
We have a motion.
I second it.
We have a second on the motion. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez?
Yes. The motion carries 5-0 to approve the plan. All right. Our next order of business is discussion and possible adoption of the East Commercial Street Corridor Master Plan.
Thank you, council members. Leiloni Shine, contract planner, Lane Logistics. I also do not have a PowerPoint tonight, just verbal. Today I'm just going to be discussing the formal adoption of the East Commercial Street Corridor Master Plan, which is attached with tonight's council agenda. At the February 28th City Council meeting this year, City Council accepted the East Commercial Street Corridor Master Plan after a presentation by Sam Bickle with Terrain Landscape Architecture. They also took the lead in drafting this plan. The February 28th meeting was not noticed as a dedicated public hearing, and to ensure the maximum value of the plan to support subsequent grant opportunities that are coming up at this time, staff is advising that there is a need to have this plan formally adopted. The city's team of consultants and staff intend to use this plan as a baseline for the city's forthcoming submission of the U.S. Department of Transportation's Safe Streets and Roads for All, abbreviated SS4A funding program. There are also elements within this plan, not the entirety of the plan, but certain portions or projects that are currently being funded through the Clean California local grant program, which was just recently awarded to the city through Caltrans. Within this plan, there is an inventory and assessment of the existing conditions along the East Commercial Street corridor, and there's a recommendation for improvements. The existing conditions inventory highlights safety concerns, amenities, and the conditions of the built elements owned specifically by the city of Willits. The inventory and assessment of existing conditions shown in the East Commercial Street Plan attempts to organize this information around a framework of 3 sections along East Commercial Street using extensive on-site and remote data collection. The recommendations from this data collection are presented as a description of possible improvements that can be applied to prescribed areas along the East Commercial Street corridor. And the master plan design concepts portion of the report takes the information gathered during different forms of input, including existing conditions work, public outreach sessions, and staff meetings, and takes those into a series of designs and solutions that will enable the city to further engage with the public, pursue projects within this plan, and explore funding opportunities within the community. By adopting this East Commercial Street Corridor Master Plan tonight, City Council will authorize the city manager to assign the task of administrating the plan to the Community Development Department, and the Community Development Department would be required to provide annual updates on the plan's implementation at the first City Council meeting in February. This plan has already been presented on the 28th, as I stated earlier. There have not been any changes to the plan since it was presented at that time and was formally accepted. And tonight we are looking at formally adopting it. Any other questions?
Does this go on the full length of Commercial Street, goes west and east also?
So there's a portion that extends a little bit past the Main Street intersection, but not the full block. And then I believe there's also a portion, there's a vicinity map that's attached in the plan itself. And I believe the extent heading eastward is, Brian, maybe you can add, city manager can add, I believe it ends right around the extent of where the sports park and the skate park areas are, those park areas.
It extends to the city limits.
Thank you.
City limits?
Yes, sir.
On the west end,
On the east?
On the east end. And on the west, it just is part of the block.
Correct. Yeah.
West of.
West of Main Street. Yeah. I know a lot of east in this presentation.
Any other clarifying questions from council?
I have one. It said in the fiscal impact, staff closed the financial portion of this project with the final project cost being $46,596. Can you clarify what that means, closed?
I may.
Go ahead.
So, once again, as noted in the presentation, this was presented back to the council on February 28th. At that time, it was presented, council took action, and at that time, we closed out the project. There was no subsequent amendments, revisions. The project's closed out. Okay. And we have used this document. We have presented to MCOG, and we are working with MCOG, our consultants at LACO, to go after the Safe Streets for All grant.
I just want to make sure this wasn't an additional fund.
No,
okay,
no,
that was it.
It's static right now.
Any other clarifying questions?
Basically, we're just making this official so that we can go after money for shovel-ready projects.
It adds value to the document as we go for grants.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, I am going to recuse myself. 2 of us have conflicts of interest because we own property either within 500 feet or on Commercial Street.
I'm getting tired of this.
You didn't know you'd have musical chairs at the council meeting. So.
Next year we'll play
All right, anything further from council? Otherwise, I'm going to open it up to the public. Would anybody from the public like to speak on this? Last chance. Okay, back up here now. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to adopt the East Commercial Street Corridor Master Plan officially to focus on a more safe and visually appealing environment.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second.
Councilman Connie?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Thank you for your patience and your willingness to hear this out.
All right.
Can I, just in this little moment here, the comments that Robin Leeler made earlier, I always thought that the FPPC could say you might have a conflict of interest or, you know, could provide information, but I did think it was the obligation of the elected person, this is for Jim really, to decide whether to recuse themselves. And it does seem to me some of the FPPC rulings have gone a little overboard. So I just want to put that out there that I agree with the comments she made, that Robin made regarding having more discretion of the elected official as to whether they needed to recuse themselves.
Are we having a discussion on recusal?
I guess we shouldn't.
We'll have to save that, and if we want to, we can make an agenda item and have legal confer on it.
And yeah, I understand.
But for now, I think we'll move on. Nobody likes stepping out of the room, but we are doing our due diligence to ensure that we're following procedure. Okay, moving on. Are we good to move on?
Yep.
Okay. We have no enactment of ordinances before us. We have on the consent calendar the City Council minutes of October 9th, 2024. Would anyone?
I would like to move consent calendar.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And then I'll open it up to the public. Anybody want to address us on the minutes of the October 9th meeting? All right. Hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
I have a question.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Is this on? My question was, we had quite a lot of discussion about the pavilion, and the minutes don't show anything. They just say that we heard from the public and did not have any report of any guidance being given. Was that a purposeful not including that? I guess I should ask Brian.
No, I think that the format of the minutes kind of followed what we typically provide to the council. We do have the video record and the recording. I think it was very clear the guidance that was communicated at the time from council to staff regarding some placement elements regarding the pavilion.
Yeah, because I made a comment about maybe having a sentence or two saying there were some things that we sort of had a consensus about, but it doesn't show up in the minutes. But
was there a, I wasn't present, but was there a specific statement to give direction to staff to do something specific that you wanted to be recorded as a matter of record?
Yes.
Okay. What was, I wasn't here, so what was it?
Did you get that email that I sent you with the?
I did not get an email that you
Oh, really? Oh.
So you can amend them at this time. You can amend the minutes.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but I actually had worded a couple of sentences just saying that there was guidance given.
Greta, do you have concerns?
I think that Matt has a valid point that typically when we approve minutes, we are approving the action that was taken. And if I recall correctly, the action was direction given to Community Development Department to reduce the size of the pavilion back to the original that was in the application, and to move it from the northeast corner to more centrally located and closer to, what is that?
State Street.
And
also
also
direction, in Dusty's nodding his head.
And
So-
the materials.
And materials,
Yeah,
looking
the other.
into something non-concrete pavers.
Correct.
Would you like to amend the minutes formally to reflect the statement that was
Yes.
just made as a recollection?
May we amend the minutes to include the direction given by council to community development at the last meeting regarding the pavilion?
And I think it was to look at pavers if possible, but that that Katie would come back in.
I actually worded this, but I don't have my computer with me, and I thought that Dolores had it. And
So we have a motion to amend the minutes. We can move forward with that, or we could put the approval of the minutes to the next meeting. What's your preference?
Are you happy with that amendment?
I think what you just, what we just described as an amendment.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All right, I'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Stransky?
What am I supposed to do because I wasn't here either?
We can abstain if we want.
Abstain.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez?
And I'll abstain as well.
All right.
All right, so 2 abstentions and 3 4, so the motion carries. All right, moving on to monthly activity reports. We have first the accounts payable activity report. If you look inside the agenda packet, you'll find that the accounts payable activity report for August 2024 is enclosed, as well as the accounts payable activity report for September 2024, the business license activity report for September 2024, and the building permit activity report for September 2024. Any follow-up questions or comments from council members on those items? Anyone from the public? Go ahead and step up.
Tamara Alaniz, very happy to see the accounts payable report in your packets. I don't know the details, but they haven't been in there, and now they are, and that's great.
I agree.
All right, these are reports. So we'll move on. Commissions, agencies, and authorities. We have no business before us in that department today. So I'll move right along to city manager reports and recommendations. We have a couple of items. I'll turn it over to City Manager Bender.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Let me just get my notes going here. All right, the first item, 8A. So the council heard and has adopted basically part 2 of our amendment to our base plan part 1, emergency operations plan that was presented to the city council on September 11th. At that time, when the council heard that base plan, the instructions to myself was bring back a scope to address both fire, wildfire, and earthquake/seismic. Earlier this evening, you already took action on the flood annex, and now I am presenting to you for your consideration a proposal from Land Logistics, and that would be incorporating Logan Shine, who just presented the element that was related to flood. We would use the fire, he did the recommendation for the fire. We would use the fire document as a base template for these next 2 units, which would be the fire, wildfire element, as well as earthquake.
Can I ask why it's 66,000? That seems
It's
a bit high.
That is, there is some contingency built into it. There's also, you're looking at 30 to 33,000 for each one. This type of document incorporates a lot of meetings with stakeholders. That's what we heard from the council. Reach out to stakeholders, allied agencies, and nonprofits in this community. That takes time and effort to arrange those meetings, to conduct the meetings, and incorporate those comments back into a document.
So the expectation is if we spent this amount of money, we're going to get a very, very detailed,
meaty plan.
Thorough plan.
Yeah, like I said, and I apologize for the...
I just want to make sure that it
confusion.
isn't going to be more of a formal document that kind of grazes over Willits, but like really gets into the heart.
Like I said, we'll
Okay.
be using the flood component as a baseline. That sets a nice template. It sets how we should be, which agencies we'll be looking at, and ones that we will be incorporating into those specific annexes as they relate to unique conditions. You know, seismic, it's going to happen instantaneously. We're not going to have a large lead-in time. Flood, wildfire, we can almost see that happening. We can have time to prepare. So there's a different mindset going into preparing these documents to address those unique incidences.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I do too.
I love the idea of doing these. I think it's important. I especially am excited about using the flood annex as a template. However, I'm concerned about carving more ARPA funds out for this, and I wonder if there's a possibility of accomplishing this task without using the ARPA funds. I feel like we worked hard to identify usage for the ARPA monies. We've already carved out $50,000 to give additional monies to the food bank, and I feel like each time some project comes up, we kind of go back to ARPA to take more money out of it, and we're not going to be left with much to do the things that council agreed. We whittled 28 items down to get stuff done.
There are some savings
You know what I'm
in the
saying?
current ARPA project budget list. The logic that was applied to tap into ARPA, one of the major elements of that program that the U.S. government established is building resiliency into your communities. So once again, it's a nice fit. And knowing that there was a quick turnaround to prepare the budget and scope to present to the council, we just went to using the ARPA. We could look at potentially going back and tapping into the general fund. We could look at Measure K, but we're still in the process right now of kind of auditing some of our accounts. This was an easy source of funding to support the project, and like I said earlier, it does fit into the guidelines of ARPA. That's the logic. And once again, the flood element, we were fortunate to prepare a grant application to support that effort. So once again, we could potentially modify the scope and look at grant opportunities and delay it. But once again, what we heard from the council was, let's move forward. We have identified to do the wildfire first and then seismic subsequently.
Councilmember Sharansky?
Yes. As I remember it, we discussed and did not come to a conclusion that I mentioned that one person could not do everything. So if you had a earthquake or something, there's a lot of things that happen, and it happens very fast, and so consequently it takes a group of people to be able to do this, and not just one person. So what I had said was that we need a group of people that are doing this or had meet anyhow to know what to do and how to do it. And I wouldn't say anything negative about you. I'm just saying that it takes more than one person. And it happens very fast, and it wrecks a lot of people's lives and stuff because there is no place to go other than to you instead of doing it with a group. That's how I remember it, but I could be wrong.
If I can comment on that, Member Stransky, this is a planning effort that would identify assistants, partners, and stakeholders. So when an incident is unfolding, who are the partners and who are the resources out there that we can leverage? It's just a plan to identify opportunities.
Oh, that's great then. If the rest of the council wants to do that, I'm still sticking with my thing is that it's going to take a group of people to do this, not just the city manager. Jerry, you have something.
The way I understand, and I think when I first saw the base plan, I saw it as kind of a boilerplate and I wanted specifics because a lot of what was in the original emergency plan from a couple years ago, a lot of the identified rallying points weren't, for example, we learned from the fire that happened that I think the original plan had we were going to send people to the Bechtel Grove gym. And I think we learned that there was no kitchen facility there, no shower facility there. And when the school opened up the school over there, I guess what I wanted out of plan, I think what you're talking about is we involve the community, we involve a lot of our stakeholders, and we get to identify new areas of places that we can send people to, plan on our evacuation routes, etc. And it's not just going to be Brian doing it. The way I understand that this plan is going to be is that the consultant would then arrange to bring in those folks that would then contribute to this plan. And so in that respect, I would support this for that reason. I don't want it to be just a Logan Shine work product. I would want it to be something where we involve our partners out there and our fire department, all those folks have a chance to come in. Our Brook Trails folks, everybody, so that when we have a disaster, we can involve all those folks. And if this incorporates that and brings all of those people, then, and again, I'm not disparaging Logan, I'm just saying that as opposed to just one plan that somebody just does, that if it facilitates that so that as a community, we can kind of come to an agreement of where things are going to be, because things have changed.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I'm...
Stransky, go ahead. And then
Okay,
City Manager.
the thing that I see, do you remember when the road went out on 101 and where you had to go down, if you were even going to Santa Rosa, you had to go out to the coast and then down through that area. So it would be real hard for one person to be able to do this, and I know it's this, but things have to happen 1, 2, 3, and they have to happen in a day, or they have to happen in a month, or they have to add, because we're not going to get any help. That's what I'm saying. We're going to have to rely on ourselves as Willits. And there are people that have equipment, there are people that have, fire engines. We have the fire department, that they're going to be right here. But if you have to move dirt, you have to move stuff, there's people that's what they do. And you have to have them in the loop to do this. That's my thing, and so if that's what the council wants to do, then that's wonderful. But I'm not going to vote for it, because we need somebody that we can just go to right now and just say, so-and-so, you have a cat, so-and-so, you have a whatever, an earthquake, and, just have somebody that knows how to do that and cover that. And then if a flood happens, the flood that we had out there in '63, and this gentleman said that happened in a matter of, Willits couldn't go any place north. It was water, and I worked out at the mill on the weekends, and we had to have the guy that low dogger to come and get us so we could help with the mill. It just happens in a hurry, and that's all I can say.
City Manager Bender, and then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, very interesting comments. Exactly what you identified, Member Stransky, that's what we would be putting into the planning document. Who's out there with these resources? Who do we turn to? Who can we call on for unique circumstances? What talents do they have? That's what this plan does.
Okay.
It's spot on.
I stated my part, so that's it. And
Madam Mayor, I think I've addressed what this plan is trying to do.
I think you have, but I also understand where Councilmember Stransky, the point that he's trying to make, and I'll make my say after I give Vice Mayor Gonzalez an opportunity to speak.
I just wanted to say, I get what you're saying, Larry, but it's kind of like if I created a plan that said, if there's a fire, call Jeff Smith. Well, Jeff Smith's not around anymore. I think what you say is you create a document that says that the fire chief or the finance person or whoever is authorized to secure and maintain a list of available resources. And then you start calling those folks, because I got to tell you, there are people that had backhoes 10 years ago that they don't have their backhoes anymore. Some are even dead that I used to be able to call for things like that. And I think if we make a plan that's that specific, it's going to fail. It's going to fail because we have to make it to where it's, I guess you can adapt. And I think that's what I'm looking at, is something that we can stay, even if it stays on the shelf for 10 years, that we identify the roles that then can go out and we authorize city and its partners to go out there and say, hey, because normally what happens in an emergency is we authorize, or the city manager does, or in the case of Brook Trails, Tamara would authorize spending resources, and then afterwards you come back and you settle those accounts, and sometimes you get reimbursed from the feds or the state, and there's forms that you have to fill out and things you have to do in order to get that done. But you have to follow procedures. You have to have a plan in place, otherwise you won't get reimbursed. And so calling Billy, Bob, or whoever we have is great, but I think if you don't have a plan where you can sit there and say, you were authorized to do this, then we're kind of stuck.
Madam Mayor, if I may as well, I've been in this situation professionally, and I hear what Member Stransky is saying. What we can do is, if you identify equipment operators, right, and you identify in your plan that the standard labor rate and equipment rate for use of that machine, if we call that person to clear a culvert, and we don't have that in our plan, chances are us to get reimbursed for that activity is probably zero. It's not going to happen. But if our planning document says that we would contract these individuals, they have this equipment, and here's a standard billable rate, our chances to seek reimbursement, like was just described by the Vice Mayor, our chances would be very high. And ultimately, yes, we're trying to save life, save private property, public facilities, but also big aspect of incidences is the follow-through, reimbursement, and making people and the community whole again.
All right, so I think that I have a different perception of what Stransky's saying. I recall the last fire that we had, and I think the heart of the discussion is really about who knows Willits best, the citizens who live in Willits. So if we're on the same wavelength, which I think we are, the idea would be that we wouldn't put this out to a contract planner to do the work and come back to us, but the idea might be that maybe a contract planner assists with facilitating the meeting, maybe at a lower cost, but it's the community that comes together that builds a plan that we all participate in, take pride in, bring resources that maybe a contract planner that was seeking may not even know about, because people in the community, when you collaborate and you get together, you have a bunch of different people, it's like, oh, what about over here, and what about this, and what about that? And I think, is that what you're really trying to?
I'm trying to say, if you have an earthquake, if you remember the earthquake, none of us remember this, but the earthquake, it took half the town.
But how would you?
You can't tell me what, I know what I'm doing.
How would you like us to build the plan? I guess that's what I'm asking you.
Wonderful, do that.
How would you like?
No, I've set my piece.
Do you want it to be at a committee level, or do you want to?
You're not going to have a committee level. You need to have people that know that if we have an earthquake, that they're on call and they're going to get the directions. I mean, it's people in town. It's people in town that you know, that are going to come and they're going to take their piece of equipment and they're going to take the concrete off of people and look for them. I mean, we're not talking about something that is planned.
Okay.
I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, but I'm going to stick with it. I'll put it that way.
Okay. Well, I can't support the plan because I feel like we already talked about ARPA funds. We already allocated them. I want to see them stay the way they are. I don't want to take the funding from Measure K, and I don't want to take the money from general fund. I believe that we need some leadership on this, but I really strongly believe that this has to be a community group that comes together. Yes, it needs some leadership, but I don't think we need to contract it out. I think honestly, any council member who wanted to put in a little bit of hard work could help get the ball rolling, and then as things start to take shape, then maybe that's a time that we identify funds at a reduced cost. I don't like the dollar amount of $66,000 to produce a document. I'm not saying anything bad about the flood document, but for $66,000, I want more. And I'm thinking, if this is my own money, which I'm spending taxpayers' money, I want more value for my money. Not that it's not of value, it's just not valuable enough for $66,000, and that's where I stand.
Okay, have you watched the news with this thing in Florida?
Yes.
I mean, there wasn't an organized thing. There were people that had food, that brought food. We were people that had everything, but it was in that community, and they put it all together. It was, I can't anymore. That you guys all like that, so let's just go with it. And when it happens, then I'm going to come to you.
I'm confused because I'm trying to understand, and you're saying we all like that. I just expressed that I didn't want to spend $66,000 on this plan. Are you saying that you want us to approve the plan?
No, I'm saying
expenditure?
that I think we're going at it at the wrong way. And I'm not going to fight about this because I don't have time to do that, because I've got another 80 pages to go through. And the thing about it is, the people in Florida weren't worried about the money. They were worried about the water. They were worried about the food. And you went to these places, and the town was demolished. I mean, it was gone. And you see all this sticks in the river. I mean, that was their houses. I mean, what do you do at that time? You don't have a committee and not worry about who's got the money and where it's coming from. You just do it. And that's what I'm talking about. But you have to know, the people have to know that if we're going to have one of these, then I'm going to call Garmin's and they're going to come with their equipment, and they don't have to have $5,000-$10,000 to do it. They're going to come and start taking the concrete out. I mean, that's to me what all the community Willits is all about, is people know what somebody does, and you just always have to call them, and if they're buried, or you can't call them, but I mean, if they have the equipment, you do it, and somebody's going to bring, you know, the food, and somebody's going to bring the water, and I mean, that's the way it works in the community, in my estimation. Maybe I'm probably wrong. I'm sure that I am. Go ahead.
Before I open it up to the public, I'll give an opportunity. Councilmember Strong.
Well, I think we're kind of talking about two different things. One is a plan that sets out sort of how do you react when an emergency happens. So it's before it happens, you plan that there are these options. And I kind of actually like what Mayor Rodriguez just said, is that maybe, at least initially, a group of stakeholder citizens and members of the council maybe could sketch out what that plan is rather than hiring a consultant to do it. That's one of the options. But the other part is, when it happens, that's not when you're, going to spend a lot of time thinking, oh, let's see now, what did it say we're going to do? You're in action. But it's nice to have a template, the sort of, what is your plan of action? Because it will happen fast. And that's when you want to be able to expend those resources and hopefully get paid back later. But you do it whether you get paid back or not. So I agree with what Larry's saying as far as, we will have to spend money when an emergency happens to fix things, to minimize the losses to our community and all of that. But having some kind of plan of action in advance seems like a good idea. I'm not sure it's worth $66,000.
Councilmember Connie, do you want to add anything for
Nope, I'm done.
Anybody from the public?
Robin Leeler. It seems like oftentimes we hire a contractor, we pay them a lot of money, they come back and tell us what we already know about our community. I think I have to agree with you, Sabrina, that that's a lot of money to pay for something we already know. I would suggest postponing this issue and coming up with something different that has more community involvement, that's more realistic for us. I remember I was working at the high school during the big fire complex when the command center moved into the high school. And I know, Jerry, you had said, yeah, they couldn't use the gym at Bechtel Grove. They moved into the high school, and all the phones were out, all the cell phones, all the landlines. Nobody could communicate, and yet the community pulled together. I mean, we kind of converged on City Hall, and there were already boards up saying, here's when we're going to tell you what's happening, come back then. The community pulled together and did that. And paying the money to a consultant isn't always the best idea to tell you about your own community. So I think this decision should be postponed.
Robin, you know who put those boards up?
Did you?
No, you know what? It was California Division of Forestry, and they, through the ICS system, they had the public information officer here working with us.
Right.
So, and we did have a emergency plan, and again, it has gotten older and older as we've gone along. I guess what I'm saying is I am advocating for community involvement because I think what we have on the shelf right now is stale. It's kind of like saying, hey, let's not go drink milk because we've got milk in the fridge. It's been there for 10 years, but we've got milk. What I'm advocating is that, and I get it that maybe people aren't happy with this amount. I'm not real tickled to spend that money per se, but, and maybe I'd be okay with bringing it back with maybe another identified source of funding, but I think we need a facilitator if we're going to involve the public. That's how I saw this playing out, is that whoever we have involves the public because we need to freshen this thing up. We're going to have another fire, okay? And again, if we don't have a current plan, a lot of this affects our funding if we try to recover. You know, and same thing, if we go out there for an emergency and our plan is expired and we mess this up as far as whether or not we can recoup anything we go after, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And yeah, I got to tell you, people came forward during those fires, and I get that, and I'm all for that. And in an emergency, I'll tell you what, I've been in bar fights where local citizens helped me out. Okay, so I get the whole thing of community involvement, but in the end, there's a plan. And so again, if there's not consensus on the council to go with this now, I would like to see consensus of the council that maybe staff be directed to come back and look at all their alternative funding just to see whether we come back to this again. But we do need a plan.
Yeah, and you're saying I mean, it was on other people's radar. They sent an information officer out.
No, basically through the fire service, it was requested that we had it. They took over the incident.
Okay.
And that's how this works, is that when there's an emergency, we request assistance for what we have, but this wasn't our fire. This fire was happening out there, and they took over that aspect of it. We provided an area where they did it. It wasn't the community coming forward and putting bulletin boards up and everybody singing Kumbaya.
Right.
There was a system in place, and at that particular point, the state was running that part of it. We were running some of the stuff on the inside and doing certain things, and we were identifying resources for the system, and we were participating. But that's how that was working.
I think you're just about at the end of your time, though.
I
Do you
am,
have any final? Otherwise, I'll go to the next person.
I would like more time to think about it, talk about it, get everything out on the table, and I would suggest postponing it. It doesn't have to be next year, it could be next month, but just at least a few weeks to talk about it more, all the pros and cons and ins and outs. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public? All right, after Mr. Alameda, if there's no further comment, I'm going to bring it back up here to the Walker. I'm sorry, Mr. Walker. Thank you.
So just sitting there listening to Larry talk, first thing that I understand is you need what's called an emergency response directory of numbers to call people, or however, drive to their house, knock on their door, say what. And you build that, and for $66,000 is a good yearly wage. So you give a guy a job of, this is what your job is, to produce this emergency response directory, and we want it to be accurate and current. Bud Garman's been here, his kids took it over. He's outlived Peterson, so there we go. Bud Garman was a good name to bring up. So he's established, his kids are doing the job, he's a good road man, he can work heavy equipment. So I'd say a directory would be the key thing to have. Not a bunch of paperwork that says this is how we should do it. We need facts and numbers. And whatever's going to happen is going to happen, and people are going to come together and help out, or they're not. I mean, back in the East, back there in Tennessee, North Carolina, and all that, you watch the news, and the first thing they're talking about is how much the government's let them down. So without the local help, there was no help. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to bring it back up to the dais. Any further comment, or does someone want to make a motion, or what is the purview of the council?
You know what, I don't think there's consensus at the
I
moment.
think Larry and I have both expressed a no, so it comes down to the other three if there is a desire to move forward. Strong, do you have a
Well,
do you have a
I
desire
guess
to move forward?
I certainly don't see much of a downside to postponing the decision, although our agendas have been really full.
What would be the purpose of postponing?
I think I think there's some merit to putting together what a small citizens group that included some of the key players could come up with prior to. I'm not sure that we as volunteers could put together a plan that was similar to the flood emergency plan, but I think that that template is there now, and we know a lot about what would happen if there's a fire nearby, or directly affecting. So I guess I feel like there are perhaps other options to hiring a consultant to prepare the plan that I'd like to have considered.
All right. So it sounds like we have 2 no's, 1 postponement. If there's no objection from other council members, we're going to forego a decision on this matter and move on to the next agenda item. Hearing none, we'll move on.
Okay. Last week I attended the Cal Cities Conference. There were over 2,300 attendees at this conference, the largest since 2015. A lot of good sessions. Interestingly enough, there was a session that I attended on emergency responses by council members and staff. And I just want to include this, is that when there's a disaster, as we described, myself, staff, and other staff members throughout the state recognize when all heck is breaking loose, the citizens are going to be looking to the elected officials. They're the ones they trust. What staff's role is in a situation...
In a crisis.
Staff's role in a situation is to help inform as you release information, make sure that information is correct. Where are the resources that are necessary? How is the recovery going to take place? So that was interesting. And hearing the comments from the council, just from the previous item, we will look at what we can do to bring it back to the council with an item that fits into the context that you described. But the conference was good. I also want to note here that the Redwood Empire Division had their business meeting. Once again, it was noted that our vice mayor is the president of the division, and we are going to hold another one of our quarterly meetings. We filled in for our previous community this past May. We do a great job in hosting these events. The division likes it. They like visiting Willits, and we're going to put our best foot forward again. And Kathy, Dolores, and the rest of the team here are going to put a grand show on. Hopefully we have something we can promote, but Jerry will be leading that discussion. So thank you.
I was supposed to be installed at that meeting, but I went to a LAFCO meeting in Yosemite, and that's why I didn't go.
Well, congratulations.
So that's what I got. We have a couple of project updates. Mr. Colling is in the audience, and you can go through it.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council members. An update on our current projects. 24 pavement preservation plan is completed. We've done a punch list walkthrough. Everything's complete on that. And next week we'll be putting in a notice of completion. The underground utilities project, there's some following resolutions that we're looking at to make some changes on the paving. That is going to be starting back up next week. We'll issue a new schedule. They're going to start finishing doing hookups on the main sewer lines and water lines and pressure testing those. And then they'll be moving on to paving, and that'll be done within the month then and stuff. The project will get a notice of completion after we get all that done. Main Street fiber optic is finished. We have a few punch list items with them. All the conduit is in. We have one section where we may have had a pipe hit under there, and they're going to be responsible for fixing that. But that one's pretty much buttoned up also. It's about 98% done. Bechtel Road PG&E sidewalk project is going full force. They're going to be pouring tomorrow some of the walls, and next week they'll be pouring the sidewalks on the west side. And then within the next 2 weeks, they'll start doing some paving work on the actual road realignment. There are a few trees to remove within the within our roadway area, but they're on schedule and probably be done within 2 months on that project. So late December, they'll be finished with that. I don't know if you have any questions.
Any questions? Hearing none, I think you've kept us pretty informed. Is that the conclusion of your
Yes, it is.
presentation?
Thank you,
Anybody
Madam
from the public have a follow-up question on that presentation from City Manager? All right, hearing none. Moving along to department recommendations, we're going to adopt a resolution approving the resurfacing of State Street at a cost of $160,170 due to its accelerated deterioration from construction activity associated with the 2024 Underground Utilities Project 2023-08 with monies from Transportation 202 and Wastewater 510 funds and a subsequent reimbursement from the Service Transportation Block Grant. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so where the pipes were being replaced were some of the oldest pipes in the city, and therefore it was some of the oldest roads. State Street was in very poor condition. As a matter of fact, according to our pavement management report that we have from 21 that's being updated right now, it was actually the poorest street in the city. It was rated as 0 out of 100. So it didn't help when we did the work on the construction work. We were removing, sections of asphalt to do underground utilities, and it made it even worse than it was. So it was in extremely poor condition. It's basically a failed roadway. We were able to allocate funds, and we would look at paving from North State Street all the way to the terminus where it dead ends into the parking lot by the skunk train and get that whole strip paved and everything through there and bring it into a much better condition than it is now.
Any questions or comments?
Does not include sidewalks and ADA, correct?
It does not, and the reason for that is that could more than double the price. We have to stay away. If we go curb to curb, we would have to include that in it and stuff. This is going to get 5+ years of extra time on it, probably 10 years of time on it, on a roadway that's in very poor condition right now.
And I had asked clarification on Marin Street. Some of the property owners had asked if it was going to, right there where it intersects, whether that's a private drive or whether that's part of Marin Street. Were you able to clarify?
Oh, that goes into the business there where the old log yard was or something?
Oh, yeah, over time, there's some mailboxes and
Yeah,
there's
it
some
is not
entrance.
going, it is strictly going from north to Main, all the way
State
down
Street?
State Street into that intersection, but it is not going into Marin.
So for clarification though, is that part of Marin Street or
I
is that
believe
a
that's a
private
private
driveway?
driveway. I don't believe that's part of Marin Street, but I can double check on that.
Yeah, I need clarification because if we're only doing State Street and that is in fact Marin Street, then when you do State Street, you're going to leave a big dip there.
Mhm.
And there was a big dip before construction happened. And I assured property owners that I would ask this question.
Okay.
And if it is the city's responsibility to fix that dip, then you do need to address that.
Yeah, we'll look at that. There's supposed to be a drainage ditch. This is something we've dealt with before, behind those houses on Marin Street. And that drainage ditch is supposed to go behind there. It's supposed to take that water out of there, but it needs to be cleaned up, and it comes into a drainage ditch along the East Commercial parking lot that the skunk train owns, and they have a drainage ditch that leads into the city system, and that's not in good shape, and we're working with the skunk train right now to clear that up, to help alleviate some of that drainage problem there in that area.
Okay.
But I will find out about that and stuff about the dip there and see if there's anything we can do or alleviate at that time when we're working on it.
Is there anybody from the public that would like to address us on this item? I know we heard comment from the last meeting. Anybody up here at the dais? Any comments? Would anyone like to make a motion?
I would like to make the motion to approve the additional cost of $60,170 to Argonaut Construction to grind and resurface State Street.
All right, we have a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. I'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez?
Yes, the motion carries 5-0 for approval of the $160,170. All right, moving on to the next item. Adopt resolution approving repairs to the south clarifier at the wastewater treatment plant due to potential mechanical failure in an amount not to exceed $156,508.66.
This is a critical piece of equipment. We have two clarifiers. This is the south clarifier. It was put in 2011. It runs continuously. It has been identified that it's in imminent failure, the motor and the bearings, and we've identified a contractor who is actually the original contractor who installed it. It's very specific there's very few contractors who are capable of working on it. It's a big project. They're going to be removing the whole catwalk and replacing all of the parts, the mechanicals to it. And we have a very short window. It really needs to be done before the heavy rains start so we don't get behind in production. We have a November 18th start date, and it'll take 3 or 4 days to get done. And we have all the staff lined up and everything. Parts have come in, and we are looking to just get approval on this that we can proceed. All of the exhibits here show the contractors we'll be working with and the budget that we have. Doing this is going to give us, this has been since 2011. It'll give us another 15, 20 years, hopefully, on this new one.
Okay. Any questions, comments, council? Anyone from the public? Go ahead.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor, Council. Tamara Alanis here on behalf of Brook Trails Township Community Services District. Thank you to Council Lance and Director Colin for reaching out to Brook Trails regarding this important capital project that's going on at the wastewater treatment plant. I can tell you from very recent experience with all of the PG&E vegetation abatement work that went on in Brook Trails a couple of years ago, particularly, we had an extremely high sediment load and went through a very similar repair on we have one clarifier in Brook Trails, 320,000, and our staff had to rebuild the motor in a kind of a similar last minute. You could hear the crunching. I think Walter said something about the crunching. That's very typical of a motor failure, and considering the wet season, we want to make sure that that repair gets done as soon as possible. Thank you for the complete staff report with all of the additional attachments, including what we had seen when you all adopted your recent budget, which is your CIP. Now, I will say that in regard to context, that it would have been nice to talk about these items ahead of time, considering that it does look like you've got about $4.3 million of proposed improvements in this plan for this fiscal year, which if Brook Trails was to, say, pay their fair share, that'd be $1.57 million, which is a lot of money to plan after the fact. So again, grateful that we had this opportunity to look at the project, talk to staff, take a look at our budget. And what I would like to say this evening is that in order to ensure that in the future there's a paper trail of this transaction, what I'm going to do is go to my board and we're going to pass a resolution that says that we're going to pay 36% of this project cost to the city of Willits, and then that way that resolution will be in order. We will make that payment and then perhaps continue to use that process in the future as we move forward on some of these items on your list for the wastewater treatment plant. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public?
Mark Walker. I'm just a little confused because a couple years back, my understanding was we did a complete rebuild of the sewer plant for a couple $1 million. And so why didn't that happen then?
I don't believe at that time there was any problems with it. Nikki, do you want to address that? Do you know?
That is one of the new,
That's what?
that is one of the new equipment that was bought.
2011.
Nikki,
Right.
if you're going to address, would you mind stepping up here, please?
Thank you, Nikki.
My name is Nicole Caldwell. One of those clarifiers is one of the purchases that was done back then. So back then in 2011, there was a brand new clarifier. Sadly, equipment lasts about 10 to 15 years. So sadly, heads up, there's going to be more breaking.
And there's no warranty, correct?
No,
Okay.
not after that one.
And this is a piece of equipment that's used continuous duty, and it gets a lot of use. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else from the public?
2011 it was put in? Yeah.
All right, I'm going to bring it back up here to the dais. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I will make the motion to approve recommended work to proceed with repairs and replacement.
Thank you.
I second it.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. I'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez?
Yes, the motion carries for the expenditure of $156,566. All right, moving on to item C, which was an added item. And I will turn that over again to you.
Another one, okay.
Vaughn.
This is again a street that we identified along with the, just like State Street, we did all the sewer lines there and the water lines, and when that was all added into there, the condition of the asphalt again was really bad. This one rated an 8 out of 100, but it's an extremely important street. It gets a lot of traffic through there with the medical, the school, and it just, the construction in doing all that work on the underground made it even worse than it was. So it probably went from an 8 down to close to a 0 and everything in condition. So we're looking at this one, again, utilizing Argonaut and their mobilization for doing paving. We're getting a good rate on it, and we'll be able to get a really bad street off of our books and repair it and stuff. And like I said, it's going to make a big difference for the school traffic there, vehicle traffic for the neighborhood, and some of the offices there and everything that utilize that street.
All right. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure the public understands that when the plan to repair the underground facilities was first passed by the council, the idea was to repair the underground facilities and not the surface, the road surface. That was going to be a separate project done at a later date. That was a decision that this council made many years ago when we committed to fixing our underground utilities first before we put new street surfaces on, which might then later have to be repaired if the undergrounds hadn't been taken care of first. So this year, the underground was done on both State Street and Madrone, no plans to do the road surface. Everyone agreed, once seeing what happened, that wasn't an acceptable condition to leave the roads in. And so we've identified funding from MCOG, the Mendocino Council of Governments, to help pay for the complete resurfacing of these streets. So I hope residents understand and recognize that council broke their own policy to actually deliver a real improvement for your neighborhoods.
And typically, we would follow that, but the roads were in such bad, these are the lowest rated roads. The one good thing going forward in the future, when we do look at these roads for complete resurfacing, including if we go with ADA and sidewalks and everything, is that they're going to have a much better base. It'll be a lot less repair work to do. It'll put us that much further ahead. It won't be a waste going forward. Yeah.
Any further comment? Want to make a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. Anybody from the public? All right. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Okay, I'll make a motion.
All right, thank you.
Approve an additional cost of $54,795 to Argonaut Construction to grind and resurface Madrone Street.
Any second? All right.
Second. She's first.
I think
All right, Strong will take the second on the motion, and I'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Connie?
Yes.
Strong? Yes. Stransky?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez?
Yes, the motion carries 5-0 for the expenditure of $54,795. All right, when we're moving on to department monthly reports, they are in the packet. Is there anything further that airport wants to add?
Yes, I would like to inform the council that we received a notification from the FAA today that they have extended the Part 16 for another month. We are hoping to have this closed out by the end of the year, but no guarantee yet. And the other thing I'd like to add is to inform our aviation community that I do have an available hangar. If anybody is interested, to please give us a call.
All right, thank you, Kathy. Community development?
Yes, just very quickly. So in the department update, it said that we anticipated that the CTC would allocate the funding for the rail trail construction funds. That in fact did happen. So they did vote to allocate the $5.4 million towards the construction of the rail trail. And then we were successful in getting the $3 million from the State Coastal Conservancy. So we'll be combining those funds. Just a little bit of an updated schedule. We also got the 100% designs for the mitigation work by the skate park. We're going to be combining the rail trail construction with the construction of the mitigation, which is required as mitigation for the rail trail project. Bid advertisement is expected to go out November 7th. I did get the advice to keep the bid period open for an extended period, more than 30 days. We are going to go for 45. It's looking like it'll be about 60 days because it's such a big project. That all puts us on a path to be before council at the January 22nd meeting seeking an award of a contract for that project. So that's moving right along. The other thing is we're very close to awarding the funds for the PLHA housing rehab program, and we'll be reaching out to those applicants that scored the highest, and we'll be receiving the requested funding for the no interest loan to rehab their homes. So we'll be making that notice and beginning to work with our partners on the underwriting here in the coming weeks. So
thank you. Thanks. All right, we don't have finance present this evening or police. Walter, do you have anything else for services, utilities?
The one thing I want to do is just call out all the staff in the wastewater, water, and our streets crews and all the services. They've been doing a great job getting ready for winter and prepping things. So just a shout out to all the hard work they're doing. Yeah.
Thank you. As always, there's lots going on in the city of Willits. And reading the monthly activity reports gives you a really good idea of all the way down to the task about what kinds of things are happening. City Council announcements, communications, and reports. Councilmember Connie, do you have anything for us?
Transportation Committee meets tomorrow. Anyone is welcome to join from the public. It starts at 9 a.m.
Yes. Strong?
The NCO Solid Waste Management will be meeting on Thursday, October 30th. Is that right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the 30th at 9 in the morning. And it's the only one that's coming up in the next 2 weeks.
Stransky?
Wastewater was postponed, and I don't know the date of it. I would not be able to be in it, and I was one of the members, I guess the only two members that voted, you, Jerry, and I. And so if I can't do it, I have an emergency. Okay.
It's October 25th, the next meeting, yes.
Friday.
Yeah, Friday, yeah.
Yeah. We're still doing it. I can't, that's the date. I thought it was going to be Thursday, so I laid the thing out for Thursday, and it's on a Friday now, and I can't do that.
Okay.
All right. Vice Mayor Gonzalez?
I went to the LAFCO conference just outside of Yosemite, not in Yosemite, and was there for 2.5 days and did a couple sessions. One of them actually was pretty interesting. It was on private water systems and what happens when they fail. And that kind of translates to what happens to our systems, because sometimes through the LAFCO process you end up adopting somebody else's problem because the state comes in and starts looking for some other agency to take over a failed water system. And so I was kind of interested on how that worked, and so that was kind of interesting. did a couple other sessions and general sessions, but that was it.
All right, thank you. None of my boards or committees met this last 2 weeks, but they're all meeting starting tomorrow and next week. And it's just been filled with lots of constituent meetings with members of the public just wanting to know information about different activities and projects that are happening within the city of Willits. So I'll move on to good and welfare. Any good and welfare?
Tomorrow night is Spooky Story Night at Brookside School, and multiple community members will be participating to read stories to the kiddos. And there's also a first ever Spooky Trails up in Brook Trails, the new loop that the Willits area cyclists have installed. So take your kids out for a spooky trip on the trails to get some candy and celebrate Halloween.
I'll be dressed as a scarecrow and a reader. All right. You have some good and welfare?
Yeah, I should have done this 2 weeks ago, but I was up on the screen and I wasn't remembering that on October 6th, Well and the Chamber of Commerce and the League of Women Voters and the Grange all co-sponsored a candidates forum. We have the 5 candidates for city council, 3 candidates vying for 2 places on the Willits Unified School Board, and 2 people vying for 1 place on the County Board of Education. And there were over 100 people there, so it was very successful, except the Zoom part of it didn't work very well, and the recording didn't work very well. But the people that were there in person, I think, really appreciated getting to see all those candidates.
All right, and it is 9:54, and we're going to close the open session, go to closed session. We'll report back out if there's any action that's taken. We will be conferring with labor negotiator pursuant to Government Code 54957.6. Agency negotiator will be Brian Bender, and the employee organization will be Assistant City Manager. Thank you. All right, we're reconvening back to open session. It is 10:26 p.m. We took no reportable action in closed session, and I'm going to close this meeting at 10:27.